to the stream. We're gonna do a quick breakdown of Anakaris. Yes, get him ready. And with me is at Cowabunga Hilder. Introduce yourself, Hilder.
Hey, my name is Hilder. A lot of you in America might not remember me because I haven't been there in a while, but right now I'm living in Japan, playing Anakaris for a long time. Not as long as Mar, but maybe I have a little bit of a different perspective to offer, so I'm here for that.
Yep, getting pretty close. Let me see. Hey, what's up, David? David, is the audio level good on your end? Let me know so I can start doing some adjusting. Mind you, this is also my first stream, so nothing.
Yeah, maiden voyage.
Yep, we're doing it. So let me see. Get this. Forgot to click on this dock. And let me get this frame data real quick. All right. Hey, thanks, Floyd man. All right, so all right, so let's do it. Hey, how's it going, Servo? So Hilder.
Yeah.
We'll begin with just breaking down just Anakaris's, just general gameplay flow. What does he want to do, or his objectives, right? And the way I feel with this character, he can excel at two different objectives, right? He really wants to either rush you down with pressure while reading the opponent while doing this sort of pressure, right? Mm-hmm. And you're just kind of like trying to gauge, is my opponent gonna want to jump? I gotta adjust my my attacks. Oh yes, by the way, I'm controlling both of these characters at the same time. I'm using
yeah, Anakaris is really good for that. With the way his pressure works, he can both train the opponent to keep doing something, or it allows him to start recognizing patterns after he's trained them to do something. So he has a lot of tools to adjust the type of pressure or attacks that he's doing in order to fully capitalize on whatever situation he's brought about in the match, with how the opponent is thinking about how to escape or get out.
Yes. So this is my general, kind of. Oh, let me get my chat up. Can't really see it. There we go. So there's a lot larger. Oh yeah, because I probably said it wrong. So yeah, probably just bad settings or something. I'll adjust it kind of later. This is kind of like my first time, so. Yeah. So my general strat with this character is to utilize the pressure strings that he has in order to kind of get a read on the opponent. And while we're doing that, I'll kind of bait the opponent into doing what I want them to do, either by preemptively striking them before they get to that position. Because really, honestly, this character has to do that sort of stuff. Otherwise, if the opponent gets any sort of momentum or anything like that, they can kind of bully him. He can't really do anything about it. So this is the primary strat that I utilize. I do know that some Japanese players do utilize some of the zoning aspects of the character. I'm a little weak on those tools, but you can definitely utilize them if you wish. They'll use jump medium punch to zone on the opponent, kind of guess, but get a knockdown off of that, or they'll use the normals to kind of just get away if they can. That's another strategy you can use. Or they can, attempt to do the hard read anti-air, which is very difficult. Which is this.
Yeah, so a lot of the zoning tools that Anakaris has by themselves aren't particularly good, but like Mar said, the fact that any time that Anakaris himself actually gets pressured or put in a disadvantageous situation by the opponent, it's so dangerous for him. So a lot of the time they really want to make their approach really clean, be very careful about how they try to get in. So they try to use a lot of the tools like the coffin dropper stuff to really make sure that from the neutral position that they're not just running themselves into a situation where they could be in some trouble. Which is a little bit of a more passive approach to the aggression. Like Mar said, you really got to apply. If you're in the driver's seat a little bit with Anakaris, I don't think he's a bad character. One of the things that I think is a little bit interesting about Anakaris is that while he is the worst character in the game, he's one of the best worst characters in a video game, I think. A lot of his strengths are more concentrated on his lack of defensive options. But offensively, if you can get something going, as long as the opponent isn't pushing you out, then you're very much in the game to compete with the character. He's strong at that.
Yes, I agree. Get back down there. All right, so yes, I agree. I feel like he's one of the best worst characters I've ever played. And mind you, I've played a lot of really bad characters in my second game career, but this character, I felt like I always had a chance because of his offensive capabilities and his defensive capabilities, at least as far as his construct of normals and usage of them, you know? But like,
yeah, like you were saying, from the like anti-airs and stuff, or just options that he has kind of from neutral, the tools that he has are actually pretty strong. He's got a pretty varied set of anti-airs and normals that you can use for different situations. The main problem comes like once you're actually at frame disadvantage and people just get to run over you. But from neutral, defensively, he's fairly good, I think.
Yes, I agree. So let's go through some of the normal tools and stuff first.
Okay.
We'll start off with the jab. Can you give us a rundown of the numbers?
Yeah. So jab has 4 frames to start up. It's active on the 5th frame. It's active for 3 frames and it has a recovery of 8 frames. One of the things about this jab is that it's actually maybe not super plus for Vampire Savior, but on hit it's +8, and on block it's +7.
Very massive for like.
Yeah, like, very long range.
Because like in current games, +8 is unheard of. That's like, you know, like.
Yeah, that's true.
That's like, oh man, I can't really do anything. It's still super massive. But in this game, +8, you know, there's a lot of tools that these characters universally have. They have, you know, they have guard canceling. They can push you away. So this character definitely needs to utilize that +8 very well in order to keep the pressure and extend his pressure, or even use it to get away. You know, you have to know a lot of things, a lot of usage with this jab in particular. But yeah, I'll let you continue with more.
Yeah. So like frame data, pretty good. +8, +7. It's not bad. That coupled with the fact that jab very long range for a jab, and it's not sacrificing too much on the start. It's still active on the 5th frame. And one thing about the jab, though, is that it's not cancelable into itself. Like a lot of the jabs in Vampire Savior, he doesn't have access to renda bonuses because of that. The jab doesn't cancel into itself. It is special cancelable, so you can cancel into specials. Some of his combos will utilize that sometimes. While it's pretty rare, you can see people do stand jab into Cobra Blow if they confirm a standing opponent or something. More often, it's used to cancel into ES hands, for example, which obviously is not a combo, but it gives you extra frames to make sure that the opponent has less time to react and do something about it. One weakness that the move does have, though, is QB crouches under it. That's one of the only things you have to worry about when using the move, but against pretty much any other character in the game, this is your go-to move to use whenever you're in range to do so, because it gives you a lot of advantage to keep your advantage afterwards. It sets up for a couple of mix-up options that Anakaris has, or continued dash pressure. This is definitely, I think, his best move.
Oh yeah,
the bread and butter of Anakaris gameplay.
Overall, this is his best move. It leads into pretty much everything, as Holger said. Yeah, like everything was accounted for. The main weakness, as he stated, was Queen Bee can duck under it. It doesn't. There's another like utility usage. This thing, as far as like if the opponent's grounded and stuff, or you can land the hits, it has tons of utility. It's kind of weak as an AA though. Don't utilize it as an AA. As you can see, you're gonna get hit. You'll use it as preemptive AA though. It's very good at doing that, and it's very good at stuffing other buttons out. But if they do clear this jump, you're probably gonna get hit. So you want to be ready with anti-airs of choice depending on your position. But overall, this is by far his best button that he has. It leads into everything. You can bait guard cancels with it. You can easily convert combos with it. The dashing version is very strong. You can link off of it. It leads into everything this character can ever want. And very versatile for every playstyle. You must use this button.
So one thing Mar mentioned, it's not a good anti-air button, which is very true. But the reason for that, which if you just look at the animation for the move, it's not super apparent. but the hitbox for this move actually starts kind of from the tip of his hand and then extends horizontally, sort of towards his waist.
Actually,
It doesn't actually follow the line of his arm at all.
Let me get that ready. So turn on this loop script so we can give him a visual.
Yeah, very convenient that we have here.
Yeah.
The wonders of technology.
Technology, here we go. Boom. Alright, so now you can see the hitboxes. And I can actually make the screen blink. Get ready for hitbox fighter. Yeah! So this is how the hitbox is shaped. And as you can see, it's all hurt box on the top. So whenever they do clear that, you can get stuff like this. And I'm going to turn it back so this doesn't look like that anymore. Yeah.
But yeah, like you said, good preemptive anti-air, especially for characters with very horizontal movement in the air that want to be dashing at you. Not really a jump, but for example, one of the things it's best at is stopping, for example, Sasquatch from dashing at you. It can stop people out of that kind of air aggression.
Yes, it's very good at dealing with horizontal approaches. And I think that pretty much covers the jab. So we'll move on to standing medium punch now. Let's get the, let me see if I can do a minor adjustment to this audio.
Yeah, maybe you can turn me down on Discord or something, or in OBS.
Yeah, I can try that. Let me let's see. Settings.
Like Mar said, first time, there's gonna be some kinks to work out.
Yeah, some kinks. Okay, we'll try that. I got you about like 75. Yeah, 75 right now.
Test. How is this, guys? Is this better?
Is this better? I can also turn down the music of the game. Hey, thanks, Hero. Yeah, let me turn the game. There we go. All right, so let's move on to the medium punch.
Okay, so
still too loud. A little bit lower.
All right,
okay.
Little adjustments. I'll go ahead and do this while you're working on that.
Okay.
So Anakaris' medium punch is also a very good normal. This is good at a couple of things. Most obviously, it's good as an anti-air. It's not so much good as a defensive anti-air, but similarly to the jab, it's a good preventative anti-air if you're anticipating someone jumping back. Mixing this into your dash pressure will really make it scary for opponents to jump back, as it's very strong at stuffing them out of that. Another use that this move has is... So the frame data is a little bit different. Let me go over that real quick. It's active on the 6th frame, the first hitbox up at the top, as you can see when Mar's doing it there. The top hitbox is active for 2 frames, and then it goes down to a hitbox that's more similar to the jab hitbox, but it's a little bit higher. That's important for a reason that I'll get to later. That's active for 3 frames. And then on hit, it's the first hit is -2, and on guard, it's -3. And the second hit is +3 on... Or, I'm sorry. On hit, the first hit is +3, and the second hit is +2. Oh, wait. I'm very sorry. I'm reading this wrong. So, on hit, the first hitbox is -2, and on guard, it's -3. The second hitbox is +3 on hit, and it's +2 on block. So this is significantly less frame advantage than the jab. This is actually not that bad of a thing. It's mostly used as a frame trap to set up. If you do this into jab, people trying to up back or do things out of it, they'll get hit out of it. So the issue that I talked about with the second hitbox is that a more significant portion of the cast of the game can crouch under it if they like not to up back or not stand block and they're crouching. So that includes Morgan, Lilith, Wolf, obviously QB. Wolf is a little bit different, Gallon, Talbane, because he can only crouch under it if he's not crouch blocking. If he's just crouching, or if he's walking forward, he'll avoid it. But like I said, the main use for this is to keep people from up backing, which is very common in Vampire Savior.
Okay. Some of my notes with this anti-air, as Hitler stated, there's 2 active hitboxes. So there's the first one, and then there's the second one. The first one, I would definitely recommend dashing before you do it. There's a high probability, especially if you're within this range. Let's say, hypothetically, some guy just neutral jumping a lot, both those hitboxes are gonna miss. So I recommend dashing before you do it. Majority of the time it'll correct, itself, and you'll be able to do it, or you'll be able to chase them down with it, just in case. Especially if you're in this position right here, and they do perform an up back, your character will be able to catch them. But if you're a little too far away, it might not work.
One thing it does have is a very high vertical range. It's one of the highest fast anti-airs that you can do in a game, especially dashing. So it's very strong at catching people from up-backing for that reason.
Yes. Tons of utility for dealing with preempt, or even just regular jumps too, mind you. The second hitbox, you can utilize it as a poke. It is plus still, so it's not too bad, and it doesn't push back that far. But normally I think you only get, maybe, depending on the position, you might be able to get a jab as a string that will prevent them from jumping like that. But not really my go-to. It's not as versatile as doing jabs or something like that. But it's still a good button nonetheless to do sometimes.
The way I see it utilized most often in strings is in the corner. If you have the opponent in the corner and you do dash strong, dash MP, to make sure that they don't jump out, and they don't jump out, which means that they're standing, they block the second hitbox.
Thanks, MSDT flip.
Then you can follow that up with a jab and then continue to dash strong. That's the kind of pressure in the corner that I see it most often utilized for.
Yes, and then,
in terms of that,
yeah,
rather than a utility anti-air.
And then it is possible to utilize this other one as an anti-air too, but you have to be really far. As you can see, the hitbox is kind of red in the front and the tip, but most of the time you'll probably get hit or get stuffed out of it. You really have to aim this really well. So it's mostly just a range thing. Like, the further away you are, the easier it is to utilize that as an anti-air, but you'll really have to be moving. And the majority of the time, you're just going to opt to choose a different anti-air over that one, but still a decent option to go for nonetheless. But I do definitely recommend dashing and using this as your anti-air of choice if you can get it out in time. And then I think that's pretty much it for medium punch.
Yeah, overall, one of his better moves, not as good as jab, just because, like we said, jab starts everything. But this move is very good. A lot of characters in the game wish they had a move like this. This move would be better if Anakaris had a throw, because it would probably be one of the best throw option selects in the game.
Oh,
unfortunately, he doesn't have a throw, although he can tech throws, but...
Yes, he can. He can definitely tech a throw, but we'll get onto that a little bit later.
Yeah, a preview of some of the trials and tribulations there.
Yeah, just a little preview of what's may or may not happen. So moving on, we'll do a standing heavy punch. Let's get some a little bit of data on that.
So standing heavy punch starts up on the 11th frame. It has 2 hitboxes, which a lot of people don't know because it's only one hit. But the first hitbox is active for 4 frames, and the first hitbox is actually very strong in the front. There's very little hurt box that Anakaris pushes out, so this will stuff a lot of things. People dashing at you kind of horizontally, similar to situations that we talked about using the stand jab to anti-air, but broader, much more. So this is like a beefed up version of that as an anti-air, as an option. And then the second hitbox, which extends further, but is much more surrounded by hurt box, is active for 7 frames, and then it has 21 frame recovery. On hit and block, this move's not very good. It's -3 on hit, -4 on block. But usually you're going to be in Vampire Savior, because you can chain things together. On block, you would chain it into sweep, which is also minus, but it pushes you far enough out that you're probably not going to get punished. So this is similarly to, I guess we were talking about jab and strong. This is used as a preventative anti-air. It reaches really far. So players have to respect the possibility that if they jump or try to either up back or jump at you, and from a medium range, they're going to have to deal with this poking at them. It comes out pretty fast for how big it is. It does good damage. It's got a big hitbox. This gets crouched by, I think, more characters than just Stand Strong does, but it's not as big of an issue because of the range that you're using it. So that's kind of a general overview, I guess. What do you think about it?
Yeah, overall, like, I really like this button. Primarily, its usage for me is just, as you stated, a preemptive anti-air. I utilize this a lot, especially if it hits them, because it causes an aerial reset, where you're going to get quite a bit of frame advantage back because you hit them out of the air, right? So this is the key to pressuring and harassing this character. It's another part of his tool set that I use to just keep pressuring them. Overall, I like to do it, like, I'll be in this position right here where I'm like, oh, I feel this guy's going to jump, so I'll hit the button, they hit up, and that'll cause a reset, right? And then I'm going to guess again, is he going to jump again? And I'll do it again, and I'll kind of just keep checking. And if I feel they're going to do something else, I might opt to do a command grab or extend my pressure right then and there, or even overhead, or whatever you need. But this is another one part of his filler tools, very similar to like jab in my end, but it does have a bigger hole in it. So like if the opponent's ready for it, you're gonna get punished for it. So not to be abused. It's more like a tool where I'm like gonna read with it, and if I'm successful, I get to extend my pressure as needed. But I can also use it as a bigger, longer range and kind of just sneak it in. So you kind of just like I basically would just move around a lot and fishing for it. And then when I do get it, I'll figure out a way to close the distance on my opponent. And
when using this move, one thing to look for is the ranges where you can hit kind of with the tip of it is pretty important. You never want to be close to someone when you've done this move, because that's a recipe for disaster.
Oh, yeah.
But you can see the ranges where Mars is doing it, kind of like just inside of the range there, where they might try to jump in. It's a little bit early for a lot of the characters in the game to have pressed a button, because it does outrange a lot of the stuff that other people will do. So that kind of range at the tip there is the strike zone, I guess, for the move that you really want to be aiming for when using it.
Yeah, it really is a Cobra. You want to strike with it. The animation is very accurate.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. We'll do stand light kick next.
Stand light kick. Okay. So stand light kick is mostly similar to, well, all of Anakaris' lights are pretty similar frame-wise. So stand light kick starts up in 5 frames. It's the same. Active for 3 frames, and then 8-frame recovery is +8 on hit, the same as jab, +7 on block. So you can see this move is very low, obviously. The main reason, or the main thing to use this move for in normal matches is for curse combos. That's something we'll get to later. Mm-hmm. But other than that, it's because the frame data is the same. It's just a replacement for stand jab in situations where you don't want to use stand jab. Most notably in the QB matchup.
Yep.
Because she crouches stand jab. So you want something that you can do dashing with it's got a decent hitbox for the area that it's aiming. It's not as good of a anti-air as jab is. Not to say that jab's a good anti-air, but it can be used for that. This move pretty much never can be used as an anti-air. As you can see, it's real low to the ground there. But functionally, it's mostly just a stand jab that people can't crouch under.
Yes, I feel the same way. It's mostly like a replacement normal in the Queen Bee matchup, and mostly just generically used in a curse combo, which I'll get to later. But overall, this normal is mostly primarily used in combo strings and stuff like that, or like links and stuff like that. And overall, its utility is pretty low, but they have about the same recovery. So like, if I think they're gonna try to stuff my jab out, I might throw it out sometimes just to kind of check and see if they're gonna do anything. Also, another note with it is that this normal will never whiff your sweep, because it is possible to whiff your sweep at max distance if you like hit a button, but for the most part, this normal will that won't happen. There are circumstances where you can force that to happen, but most of the time this normal is just so short range that you're mostly going to get what you want out of it.
One disadvantage that this has compared to jab is that because it's a kick move, you can't chain it into other lights. An advantage that jab has over it is that you can chain it into either stand short or crouch short, which is another light move that has similar frame advantage for it, +8 on hit, +7 on block. So because this is a kick, you have to, if you want to go back into another light, if you're doing a string or something and you want to keep that frame advantage that his lights offer him, whereas most of his other moves are pretty minus, then you have to do a link, which it's not too hard. It's like I said, the frame data is good, +8, +7, but it's a mechanical difference. It might be more reliable for some players to use jab or crouch jab as a replacement for this if they want to be chaining into other lights.
Yeah.
Since this doesn't have that ability.
Yeah. Overall, you'll be using stand jab a lot more than this tool. But I'll pick the matchup where this tool will apply, and you will think that it's there. And now we'll move on to stand medium kick.
So, stand medium kick is not as good as the other buttons we've talked about so far that have some utility purpose to them. Stand medium kick is mostly a move that you use sandwiched between chains as his main in-between chain move. No one crouches under this, so there's no issues with that. It's got good range, so it's usually going to hit. The damage is good. I'll give you the frame data real quick. It starts up on the 7th frame, so 6 frames of startup. It's active for 4 frames with 24 frame recovery. On hit, -3. On block, -4. The hit doesn't matter so much because you're going to be chaining into sweep pretty much all the time. This has better damage than stand strong or one hit of crouch strong. So in chains where you're not going to get 2 medium hits, you're going to get pushed out too far. This is your button of choice to use in those kind of chains. But it's mostly just for that, a combo filler move. You don't use it a lot by itself.
Yeah, I feel the same way. For the most part, I never really use this button. It lacks a lot of utility from the other buttons that we just went through, as stated. Even as a preemptive anti-air button, it's not really too good. I guess it's okay in this situation where I don't feel like stand medium punch is going to get the job done and I need something out, and stand heavy punch is too slow in the situation where that'll cover. But for the most part, you're gonna end up using maybe another button to handle those situations. It's not going to be your go-to button. It primarily is a combo filler tool, and you cannot cancel out of it either. It's not a cancelable button, so like it lacks in a lot of areas.
Yeah, Anakaris' only cancelable buttons are his lights.
Yeah.
Those are the only ones that are cancelable. So, yeah, you can chain into this in combos, but that's really all it's used for. If you look at the hitbox, it looks like it would be pretty good at stuffing like low pokes from the opponent from kind of a mid-screen range. But because the startup is kind of slow and it's just kind of an awkward move to use and it's so vulnerable above the hitbox, it's pretty much never used by itself.
Yeah. All right. Let's go on to this thing.
Okay, this is a weird one.
Yeah.
So next we have stand roundhouse, which is... So first of all, this move is airborne from frame 5 onward. So from frame 5 onward, you can't be thrown. You can see he jumps in the air there when you do the move. If you hold forward or backwards while he's in the air, it'll actually move Anakaris. He can move a little bit while he's doing this move. The hitbox is okay. It only has 1 hitbox, so generally I think it's worse than stand fierce as far as the hitbox goes. It's very minus 12 and minus 13 on hit and block respectively. And because this is a roundhouse button, you can't chain into something safer. This is the end of the line. You can't do anything else. If you use this move, you really have to commit to it, and it's not a good time to commit to. I don't really ever use this move on purpose.
Yeah, I don't use this move on purpose either. It mostly just comes out on accident. But as he stated, you can use, if you can get the button out on time and they're not frame perfect, you might be able to get away with, like getting away from a throw setup, maybe. But it's very difficult to get that button to come out on time. But that's its only use, really. And then another use for it is it's actually deceptively good at stuffing really long range jump-ins, but you'll have to be looking for those. But if they air block it, you're pretty much gonna push them either further away. But if the character has an air okay move, like Dimitri, he's gonna get in anyway. So
that's a good point that Mar brought up. All of the buttons that we've talked about so far, because Anakaris is on the ground, are air unblockable, because that's the way jump guard works in Vampire Savior. But like he said, this move is not air unblockable because he happens to be in the air when he's doing it. It's considered an airborne move. So really a sad state of affairs all around with it.
This button's the suffering.
Yeah.
Yeah. And let's see. Now we'll move on to the crouching normals.
Crouching world. Okay.
Crouching jab.
So crouching jab, similar frame data to what we talked about earlier. It starts up on the 5th frame. It's active for 3 frames. It has 9 frames of recovery. So this is different from stand jab and stand short in that it's one less. So it's +7 on hit and +6 on block rather than +8 on hit and +7 on block. So a little less frame advantage that you get from this. This is also mostly used as a kind of replacement for stand jab when you want something that hits at a lower trajectory.
Hey, thanks.
Anakaris gets pretty low during this, so it can stuff some kind of dash air attacks unexpectedly, but it's not super reliable for that. Mostly similar to how you would use stand short, I think. But it does lower his hitbox considerably, because Anakaris is a very tall character, so using stand short leaves you pretty vulnerable. This avoids some of that at the cost of having a little bit worse frame advantage, although you can chain into light, like stand short or crouch short afterwards if you're not doing it dashing. Although doing it dashing is probably one of the better things to do with this move. Anakaris has a little bit of a unique situation where he can do dashing standing or crouching moves, where other characters cannot do that in this game. When he dashes, he can choose to do a standing move or a crouching move. So one reason why it's very strong to do dash, crouch, jab is that it will actually allow him to move forward with a lower hitbox. This is very important. As you can see, Anakaris is very tall. There's a lot of things that he probably wants to get under. So being able to move forward with a low hitbox is pretty important for the character. So this is what that move is mostly utilized, for me at least.
Thanks, Solidify. Yes, I feel the same way. This normal is just another utility move, just similar to stand jab. Thanks, Proxy Tag. I mostly utilize this move as a dashing movement tool as well, just to lower the hitbox. So I can kind of like attempt to sneak under people sometimes. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It's positional dependent. But there is a hidden weakness to doing dashing low attacks. Whenever you do a dashing crouching normal, this character will auto stand up for 2 frames. He's doing, like I'm not holding. He's just kind of like stuttering right here. Hey, thanks, Dreamy Robot. Yeah, so this move has a hidden disadvantage built into it. So like, let's say, especially in this matchup, the Dimitri matchup, where Dimitri can do this kind of low fireball where you kind of can duck under it, but it's prohibitively difficult. You definitely can't walk through it, so you have to use a dashing crouch jab to get under it. But there's a risk, because if you mistime it and the fireball's low enough, your character will automatically stand up into it and get hit. And
yeah, this matchup is actually probably one of the best to illustrate the uses for that, because Dimitri has this real annoying thing he can do where he can throw a fireball kind of in the middle of the screen, right above Anakaris' head. So you can't do anything. If you jump, you'll have to block it and get pushed back. And if you do anything standing on the ground, it's going to hit the top of your head there, as you can see. So it's a tool that you can use to try to avoid that situation, but there's still risks involved, like Mar said.
Overall, it's a very solid normal. It's another great utility normal to add to your jab series of normals. Definitely a great pressure extender. Definitely, it can also kind of sort of be used for anti-air as well if you're further away. If you're really far away, you might be able to sneak this in as a anti-air, but you have to be really careful of the active frames of the jump in.
Yeah, they can't really be coming in above you. It has to be very horizontal, far range.
Yes. And it's a little bit better at doing that than stand jab will ever be, because this one definitely going to get you hit. But this one, a little bit less risk of getting tagged. And I think that's pretty much it with crouch jab. So
yeah, very similar to a lot of the lights, which we already talked about. There's a lot of similarities between them. They're used in similar situations.
Yes, there's a lot of overlap between the tactics used between them. We'll move on to crouching medium punch.
Okay, crouching medium punch. This is, I think, another one of Anakaris' best normals. This move is actually very good. So it starts up in 5 frames on the 5th frame. So that's the same as his jabs. The first active hitbox on this move is the same as his jabs. So on the 5th frame, and it's active for 6 frames, and then the second hitbox is active for an additional 6 frames. And then on hit, it's -10, and on guard, it's -11. But most of the time, you want to be chaining from this. So the frame data doesn't matter too much. This is mostly used as an anti-air. That's the best way to use it. From people kind of jumping in from far range, coming at a kind of a diagonal angle at you. You want to be using this as, this is probably your go-to anti-air. You want to make sure, absolutely sure that it hits so that you can chain into a sweep at the end of it. Because even if you anti-air someone successfully and their air reset and you don't chain, they're probably still going to punish you. It takes a very long time to recover. But it starts up very quick. The first hitbox is also very good. The second hitbox is a little bit less good. A lot of characters can crouch it if they happen to be on the ground. And the hitbox is a little bit less good at beating other things in the air. But this is an extremely good normal of Anakaris'. Another thing that it's good at, in Vampire Saver, you can tech throws while crouching. So if you're afraid that someone is going to try to tick throw you and you're down backing, you can use this instead of one of his lights as you're, kind of mashing out as you do as Anakaris. Because if they do throw you, it'll work as a throw tech option select. And it starts up in the same amount of time that a light would. So it's useful for that.
Yes. Yeah, overall, it's a very great utility anti-air. It's kind of lacking on the damage department, so you're going to have to hit this a lot, but it's very good at getting what you need, which is aerial resets. If you're fishing for this move, you're preferably going to do it around this range right here. This is the perfect range to hit this normal, and you're going to hit you can pretty much hit either preemptive jumps or jumps that reach the apex, but when it gets a little bit lower, it's a little bit dicey, depending on your timing. But overall, this is one of his best anti-airs, where you just kind of like, no, I don't want this guy to come next to me. This is one of the best normals for achieving that.
So another thing about this normal, other than the utility aspects of it, you often see this used in chains against characters who can normally crouch. Stand strong is a better damage option, but you see it in chains against characters that could crouch, stand strong, and you're close enough to do 2 strongs in a chain. So a chain will be something like jab short, crouch strong, stand forward, and then sweep at the end. And so it can sometimes be used for that. You can also chain after the second hit of it, although usually you don't want to do that on purpose because then you can't get a stand forward, and you will usually push you out too far for a sweep. But it is an option if you happen to not cancel it in time and you see that the second hit hits, you can cancel it in a sweep to make it a little bit safer.
Yes, I agree with that. The complete usage of this normal. Overall, yeah, you're just generally going to use it as an AA. It's pretty much most of its utility. But it will also be your replacement for jabs. And I think that's pretty much it for this normal. We'll move on to Crouching Fierce. Yeah. Crouch
Fierce. Okay. So between Crouch Strong and Crouching Fierce, these are the 2 options that Anakaris has to anti-air. Most situations can be covered by using one of the 2 options. Crouch Strong is mostly used for people jumping in from a little bit further, and then Crouch Fierce is an amazingly good anti-air for people jumping in kind of right above you. As you can see, the hitbox is very good. This move starts up on the 7th frame, so it's a little bit slower. But the first hitbox will beat pretty much anything coming down on top of you. It's active for 21 frames, as you can see. It goes quite high in the air. The second and third hitboxes are much worse, completely surrounded by a hurtbox. So you really want to be aiming to use the first initial hitbox as the actual anti-air. So it's a thing where it starts up a little bit slow on the 7th frame, but you want to also do it as late as possible to make sure that that's the hitbox that you're interacting with them with. On hit, it knocks down. You still want to cancel it into sweep on hit, because sweep recovers faster than just letting it play out, because this move takes a very long time, especially if you are actually hitting with the first hitbox, which you're trying to do. On block, it's -29. On block, you pretty much always want to cancel it in a sweep and hope that it'll push you out far enough that you won't get punished. And it's a little bit less Midas, but you definitely want to not whiff this, because not only are you extremely vulnerable frame-wise, but you have a giant pillar of hurt box that's just extending there for people to do all kinds of multi-jump-ins on you. But extremely good anti-air, especially in combination with Crouch Strong.
Hey,
the two of them will cover the air for you great.
Yeah, I feel that this is one of his primarily more strong anti-airs on my end. I usually fish for, this is my main anti-air to fish with. Just mostly because of the knockdown stats that you get out of this move. Gives you a lot of frames to work around with. You can get you can set up a mix-up game off of it. Very high utility, but if this one happens to hit, you don't really get too much off of it. Even though you can cancel into sweep, you're at best going to be able to pressure with a jab if you do get enough frames for it, and it depends on how high you actually hit this move. But if it's hit too low and it didn't cause a knockdown, I would just recommend moving away. That's probably your best bet, because generally, the opponent, if they see that, they're probably going to want to re-jump or something like that. In which case, you can probably fish for another anti-air, but it's too risky. I would just, most of the time, just back off in that situation. But overall, really great button to get a knockdown with as an anti-air. I mean, this is probably one of the few buttons that do get a knockdown as an anti-air. There's not many buttons like this one.
Yeah, that's really important. Like, so Mar was saying one of the reasons the knockdown is so important is because all of Anakaris' anti-airs have really long recoveries, so you're going to have to be canceling them into sweep to make use of them. So the fact that this knocks down instead of just air resets is really nice, because it does let him continue pressure. He gets to set some stuff up off the knockdown and start his pressure game going, which Anakaris desperately needs. Whenever he's in a situation where he's trying to defend or get the person off of him, he needs a good period of time to stop things and set up on his own. One thing about the move, though, that this situation doesn't come up hardly at all, but I believe the second or third hitbox, if they block it if they get hit on the ground, it doesn't knock down. So you want to be chaining in a sweep to make sure that you still get the knockdown. I've only seen it in a few matchups where a character is standing next to you and not blocking, and they walk into it and then they get hit by it and they're not knocked down. So it's something you want to watch out for, but very rare that would actually be relevant.
Yes, this button overall, like, I really do enjoy fishing with it. Generally, you want to use it around this range, and again, you want to use. I usually use it dashing, as late as possible. Especially the backdash version is actually really, really good. Because you can use Pursuit Attack to reclose in the distance again on whiff. But overall, one of his better anti-air buttons. There's no doubt about it. You'll be using it a lot.
Like Mar said, this can be a really good and surprising option, dashing under someone to really get right under them while they're jumping. Maybe they wouldn't have expected you to be in that position, and they thought that they were safe from getting anti-aired. One thing you do have to consider, though, when dashing with it is that you can't chain from a dashing normal. So if you do hit with it, it's possible that you might get punished, but it's still because it's a knockdown, you're somewhat protected from that. But something to consider is that you can't chain from a dashing normal.
Yes.
When using it that way.
I think that's pretty much it with this button, right? We'll move on to Crouch Light Kick, which is also very similar to all his other lights.
Yeah, so Crouch Light Kick is similar to his other lights. Well, there's one key difference.
There is a key difference.
That's different from all of his other lights. First, it starts up 1 frame slower. So it's active on the 6th frame, active for 3 frames with 11 frames of recovery. But the the data on hit does return to normal with stand jab, stand short, plus 8 on hit, plus 7 on block. But what makes this most different is that it hits low.
It's a low.
This is very, very good at hitting low. You can see the range is pretty good. You can use it dashing. This coupled with Anakaris' overhead options is make this a very important tool in making sure that they can't just stand block your light pressure. The fact that it's low is extremely nice. It is a kick, so you can't chain into other lights from it, but +8 on hit is fairly easy to chain in or to link into your lights from it. It has a long range hitbox. One frame slower startup isn't a particularly huge sacrifice for how useful this move is in opening people up.
Yeah, as usual, it has similar utility with all the other light buttons, but this one starts off at a low. So generally, it'll be used in the standard mix-up games, which will be usually off a dive, like a whiff dive into low, or dashing low on someone's wake up on meaty, where they're guessing that you're going to do an overhead, but I did dashing low instead, which should be able, if you time it correctly on meaty, it should be able to clip them, even if they're trying to jump out. So it's very important normal to use in your pressure, and generally it's probably your go-to if you feel like nothing's happening, you're in range, and I'm gonna just do a dashing low. Let's see what happens, and you should be able to hit confirm and link off of it most every time, especially if it hits point blank. But very important normal in his arsenal of lights.
Yeah, so because it's low, it has a little bit of an advantage over his other lights. If you find yourself in a situation where you want to use a light attack, and it doesn't really, none of the utility of the other lights matter, like the fact that their hitboxes hit higher, or range or something like that, then you probably want to use this move, as it has the additional option of them just not blocking low. There's somewhat of a mix-up involved.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure that's it with this normal. It's very similar to all the other lights normals, other than it being a low and having similar frame data to stand jab.
Yeah, like we said, there's a lot of redundancy with his lights. They have some little utility differences, but they function pretty similarly if they're landing.
Let's see. Then let's move on to crouching medium kick.
So, crouching medium kick, similar to his stand medium kick, is mostly just used in chains. If you hit confirm a chain on hit, you usually don't want to use this move, as the damage is worse than stand forward, and it also pushes out too far to sweep fairly often. It does also hit low, which is something. Usually it's used on block. If you're doing chains on block and you want to push them out, maybe you did crouch strong or something, and you need to continue the chain to push them out to make yourself safe. You would chain from crouch strong into crouch forward into crouch roundhouse. The startup is 12 frames, or it's active on the 13th frame, so very long startup on this move. Like, it doesn't matter too much, like I said, because you pretty much always are going to be using it as part of a chain. 20 frames of recovery. On hit, it's +1. On block, it's 0, which is better than it looks, but so you can kind of use it. One thing actually that it's useful for is that you can cancel it a little bit, maybe later than some people would expecting, or you can, you can cancel it into sweep often, but you can also elect to not cancel it and then do something else instead. So if they're anticipating you canceling it into a sweep, it'll kind of train them to keep down backing instead of holding up back, and so it allows you to get some stuff afterwards. Like I said, it's 0 on block. But mostly used in between chains as part of a little bit of a setup with a frame trap there if you get them trained to block a sweep after it. Not a whole lot going for it as a move by itself.
Yeah. This move is primarily supplemented by your pressure game, especially if you're within striking distance. Then it becomes a little more useful, but overall, if you're a little too far, this move starts to suffer from causing a lot of your follow-up chains to whiff.
Yeah.
So you have to be careful of the ranges that you throw it out at. But it's very good at in the ranges where you're around low forward. That's where it becomes kind of decent, especially if you kind of walk and then do it. But if you're just standing and doing it, it's gonna probably cause a lot more headaches But overall, it's not really used as much as the light series. Hey, thanks, Dr. Higsby. Overall, I would opt to generally not use this move over the other series of normals that this character has. Hey, thanks, Generic Julio.
Yeah, even in chains, most of the time there's a better option.
Yeah. And that's pretty much it with this normal. It doesn't have a lot of utility outside of like being the final like medium, I guess, from a look. Because like I guess you can go into stand heavy into sweep maybe, but that chain's very finicky. Because of the
you have to be very close to be getting that.
Yeah, so most of the time you're just gonna opt to do low forward sweep as your primary chain. That's pretty much it with this normal. Not a whole lot about this normal. It's not his greatest normal. We'll move on to sweep.
All right, sweep. So this starts up on frame 13. It's active for 4 frames. 25 frame recovery. On hit, obviously knocks down. On block, it's -1. So much safer than a lot of these other normals that I've been talking about that are -20, -15, whatever. So that's why you want to chain into this move afterwards to be only -1. This also is mostly used just as the chain ender. This is how you end your chains, get your knockdown, you can follow up with additional pressure. Sometimes you use it to punish things from full screen. One thing you do is dash sweep. Dash sweep, get your knockdown, and then continue for people who are doing something unsafe very far away. Although that's not something you want to be doing a lot, because it does have 25 frame recovery. If you're just whiffing it, you're sitting out there for a very long time with your hurt box extended out with its legs. Not a great situation to be in. Also just the end of your chains, though.
Yeah, overall, it's, as Hilder stated, this is pretty much utilized in his Magic series to gain a quick knockdown. Depending on how quick the knockdown you do, you can use that time period to get Anakaris in closer for dash Oki, which I'll get into a little bit later. But depending on where you did it, you'll either be able to close in the distance or you will not. But you still need to utilize this move, even like as just a neutral tool by itself sometimes. Sometimes you do need to do this as a resort to getting any kind of knockdown. Any little advantage you can get with this character, you're probably going to have to use it. But don't make this your go-to move. This is probably like the back burner move that you'll use very rarely.
So yeah, some things it does have going for it. It's very long range, so you can use it in neutral against characters like, for example, for Lele, or people who are kind of just throwing projectiles at full screen. If they throw a bad projectile from mostly full screen, you can dash and sweep them. And even if you trade with something that you're doing, if you get the knockdown, that's generally going to be worth it for Anakaris to try to do. So you can really get in there if they're kind of trying to do things full screen, they feel like they're a little bit safe. Dash sweep will cover a lot of distance really fast, and if it hits, you get a knockdown. On block, it's -1. But you mostly just have to be worried about whiffing it in those situations. But if you see them trying to do something, you can see Dimitri is a little bit more of a problem with that, but if timed differently, it can be somewhat useful in trading with Fireball.
This tool
more useful in other matchups.
Yeah, like it's very useful in like matchups such as like BB Hood, where this normal has them active for so long that you'll be able to duck under the missile while you're doing a dash. So like if they do a high missile, you'll definitely be able to clear that. It has quite a lot of utility because of how long it is, but also at the same time, don't just throw it out, because the moment somebody jumps in, you're done.
Even in matchups where it is useful and the opponent is playing in such a way that you get pretty good use out of it, be very careful after the first one for them to be watching for it, because it's not something that you could just do all day. It really exposes yourself if you're going for it.
And that's pretty much it with the normal. Overall, it's another part of his game, getting a knockdown and leading into Oki, but can also be used in neutral and some situational like anti-airs and stuff like that. Sometimes depends on the hitbox. This, by the way, this game, if they do land on the ground, you cannot hit them with the low. This is not a game where trip guard deactivates. But they won't be able to jump for 2 frames. So you can definitely use that as a way of kind of sneaking in a normal. And that's pretty much it with this button. Let's move on to command overhead or medium kick.
Okay, so this move is a little interesting. It is an overhead. It starts up on frame 23. It's active for 9 frames. There's 2 hitboxes. One kind of higher one, and then one that's very low to the ground. There's 14 frame recovery. On hit, it's -2 the first hit, or the first hitbox, and -3 the second hitbox. And then the lower hitbox to the ground, which you mostly only get as a meaty, on hit is +4, and on guard it's +3. Because it's has 9, well, I will get into that right now. But this move has 2 uses. One, it is an overhead. So a lot of people think, well, it's a mix-up option. It can be sometimes. It's about as fast as it's possible to do a pyramid dive, which I'll get into later when we talk about it. But it's a little bit more useful as a kind of a slower version of stand strong to keep people from jumping out. The additional utility that it has over stand strong is that it does come down and hit lower against characters who could potentially crouch a stand strong. It does reach up not as high as stand strong does, but it is an overhead. Because of the way Vampire Savior works, you can chain into sweep. On hit, you pretty much always want to chain into sweep. You can get your knockdown. There's not really a reason why you would want to do something else. It is plus on hit, so you do have the option of maybe doing something with those plus frames, but it's not guaranteed. So usually with Anakaris, if you get something that is guaranteed, you want to do it because you have so few opportunities. So you may as well try to take advantage of them. If you do want to elect to use it as an overhead, it's best to do it in the corner. Because this move does have a long startup, 22 frames, they could do a lot of things in the corner. There's less things that they can do to get away from it. And it does also, like I said, option select into being a pretty good tool at keeping them out of the air if they're trying to jump.
Yeah, as stated, it's very good at keeping people out of the air. It has really deceptive long range, so like you can basically do it almost from like 3/4 of the screen. Sometimes you might be able to get away with it. It depends on how pokey the opponent is. But if they're not hitting buttons but they are jumping, this might be a go-to option for it. Plus it'll eventually cover that, so they're gonna have to deal with it. And it's plus, so it's okay to do from really long range. It's also really good on Oki, so like
it's very active.
Yeah,
so
combo knockdown, you can kind of sneak that in. It's pretty good at doing giving you a good overhead meaty, especially if you stop like Anakaris from moving before you do it. That way you can get your chain and sweep and kind of reset the situation, possibly. But it's kind of situational, but very good if you know where to place it.
Another very situational thing with this move, if you meaty with the last frame of the second hitbox, it's possible to link a light. So you can get a full chain from that, although that's a 1-frame link.
Yeah,
and
it's pretty hard.
It requires a perfect meaty on the last frame.
I'll find it. Testing it right now. Oh, no, I missed it. I'm going to give it another shot. And fail. All right, let's go. And that's pretty much...
so mostly you want to just chain into sweep at the end.
Yeah. I have my own special method of finding meaties with two. I'm using 2 controllers at the same time right now. That's how the character's moving around. But whenever I test for meaties, I hold up with the second controller and kind of like try to link off of that. Because if you're holding up and you hit the opponent, usually 9 times out of 10 it's around the frame where the move is going to be really, really meaty, or at least prevent the opponent from jumping out, and that's good to know where to place your buttons at. So that's how I test for meaties in pretty much every game.
That's a good thing to do in Vampire Savior, because even if it's not really meaty, as long as it's within their jump startup frames and you can get a combo on the ground, that's going to be good because people are going to be holding up a lot.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of holding up in this game. And that's pretty much it for grounded normal series. Overall, you have quite a bit of tools to choose from. He's got a lot of versatile tools. You got some stinkers here, but overall,
In general, yeah, his normals are very good. Most of his bad normals are kind of just chain filler. Only a few of them, like Stan Roundhouse, are really ones you want to avoid, and he's got a pretty varied set of quite good ones.
Yeah, he's got some of the strongest normal sets in the game.
To recap a little bit, I guess all of his lights are good. Stand strong is very good. Crouch strong is very good, both in their own right. His medium kicks, not great, but not terrible. Mostly combo filler. Stand fierce, crouch fierce, both very good moves. Sweep, very good move. Stand roundhouse, you probably want to avoid. But overall, that's pretty good.
Yeah, and that should do it for all his grounded normals. We'll move on to the aerial normals. But about his aerial,
This is where things get a little weird.
This is the weird thing with this character. So the grounded normals are all really basic and straightforward. But when you start getting to the aerial game, he starts floating, and he can do multiple jumps. Very crazy.
Yeah, Anakaris has 3 jumps.
Thanks,
Only character in the game with 3 jumps. He has the float, the neutral jump there. That'll be pretty important for a reason I'll get to later. But as you can see, very slow floating in the air. He has the biggest hurt box in the air.
Oh yeah.
The giant square around him.
Big square. So we'll start off with the float, as this is probably the common normal. The jumping that you're gonna get on accident. So the main thing with this character is you're gonna try to avoid neutral jump as much as possible, because it's going to prevent him from having any sort of mobility. Now, there is some hidden benefits to the float, and one of them is proximity guard. He's not affected by it because he's in an aerial state. The only way you can affect him in proximity guard is with a jumping normal. But if it's a grounded normal, he could use that to sneak away from the opponent. So it kind of moves as fast or near as fast as his dash. So it's not too bad at using it for a tool to get away. And
speaking
also,
of which,
all his normals in this state are overheads. So you can kind of do a pseudo mix up with it, where you're going to be like, let me do this medium punch a bunch of times. And then they're like, oh crap, he's doing a bunch of medium punches. Let me stand up. And then you're like, I'm doing a low. Kind of situational, because it's not as fast to get to that low, but it can be done. But that's pretty much it for the float. And then also he can go one tier higher, so he has a 2-tier float. So this is the first tier, and then you can go up to the second tier. And mind you, when you're hitting buttons and stuff, you can also go to the second tier and start hitting tons of medium punches. And they're kind of just stuck dealing with this. It is possible to sneak into normal, but you can kind of just stop and bait them with it. So it's got some utility and some gimmickry to it, but overall you're probably not gonna want to use this tool set as a primary thing with this character. But it has some situational usage. So yeah.
Another thing with the float, like Mar said, you kind of don't want to do it just in neutral, but one weakness that Anakaris has is that his forward and backwards diagonal jumps have 4 frames of jump startup, which is 1 frame longer than most characters in the game. Most characters have 3 frames. However, it's only 1 frame startup for his neutral jump, which, while this is not a great option, many characters in the game have infinite or pseudo-infinite block strings that they can do on him. Some of these have 1 frame gaps that he can't really get out of with a good option, so he has to do neutral jump to get out of. And they can still cover this, but it makes the opponent have to do a little bit more work to ensure that their block string stays sound. So the fact that it has 1 frame of jump startup is kind of the most utility that you can usually get out of this move. It can get you out of some situations and create a little bit of a scramble that maybe the other person's not ready for.
Yeah, like as stated, there's some utility with this, but overall, you'll be trying to learn to avoid this thing as much as possible.
Yeah,
it's been good practice to not attempt to, but the options are there, and sometimes you'll win with them when you. And like I won with this quite a bit, so it has some utility to it. I'm not gonna use it as my primary tactic, but it's there. Something to consider. And then we'll go on to the jumping normals.
Okay, so first, jump jab. This is one of Anakaris' 3 fastest air normals. The other 2 will surprise you when we get to them. It starts up on the 7th frame. It's active for 3 frames. Has 20 frames of recovery. So this you want to use this move, like I said, because it's one of his 3 fastest ones. The other 2 that I'll get to have quite different hitboxes. You mostly want to use this if you want something right in front of you. Kind of as a little bit of a barrier between yourself and the opponent. The other ones come at a little bit of a different angle. So you want to use this mostly if you really need a hitbox kind of right in front of you. You'll use this often, for example, after chicken blocking something in the air and someone is still standing right next to you. You can do this, get an air reset, they'll land on the ground, then you can follow up with a pyramid dive or something else afterwards. Its biggest use is for that.
Yes, those are pretty much most of the primary usages of the jumping jab. About his jump too, the float. So you can, like, when the character's coming down, if you are able to sneak this in somehow very slowly, you can get a full jumping combo with this, but it's prohibitively difficult and at the same, like, the opponent will usually expect you to do the dive kick, which we'll get into, but sometimes you will be able to manage to sneak these in every once in a while. Or sometimes Anakaris will end up floating behind them, and he will, like, as long as you do like a double jump, he'll turn around. So it is possible to sneak in some, like, gimmicky fake cross-up stuff, but they have to be in a very particular, like this situation right here. This situation, it's the only time you can get the like a really ghetto fake cross-up, but it's they really have to sit there for like over like probably 200 frames just to get to that position. So not something you'll go for, but it's still an option to consider. And let's move on to jumping medium punch.
So jumping medium punch. This is probably overall Anakaris' best air normal. When you're jumping around, this is going to be the one that you want to throw out. You can see it goes out very far. The hitbox actually where it hits is fairly good for anything that's kind of below you. If the opponent is about the same height on the screen as you, coming in horizontally, it's not going to trade very well there. But against people on the ground, they're kind of jumping up in the beginning frames of their jump. This does a really good job of shutting them down. It is a little bit slower. It starts up on the 9th frame. It's active for 4 frames. It has 13 frames of recovery, so much less than jump jab. So you'll often find yourself doing multiples of these in a jump, 3, even 4 sometimes. Yeah, generally this is going to be, you're going to be jumping in and you want to use this as a poke to kind of put hitboxes out on the screen, try to control space, ensure that the other player is, if they're on the ground, stays on the ground, so that you can, when you do get in, you can use something like a pyramid dive to continue locking them down and start your pressure.
Yeah, overall, one of his few air-to-air normals that are useful at a longer distance. If you are able to like slow down your usage of it before they're like you're just waiting for their active frames to run out, you can use this as a tool to snipe them out in the aerial game. But overall, you're mostly gonna hit this around this range where you're just like, I'm gonna get away, but I need something to cover this angle, because you don't want your opponent to just jump in on you, so you'll mostly use it when you're jumping up back. But it can also be used as a tool of going towards them as well. The only risk to that is if they chicken block it and they're a little close, you might end up getting hit for that. But
so there's some extreme examples of that with, for example, Lilith. If she blocks this in the air, she can immediately punish you with an LI because he does stick out kind of far. So you have to be a little bit careful with that.
Yeah, you must be careful with that in this particular matches. But if it's at max distance, overall it's pretty safe for the majority of the cast.
Yeah, one of his fastest recovering air normals.
Yes, as you were seeing with the float, it does recover extremely fast for no reason. So you can use it to kind of harass people sometimes. But most of the time you're going to just use it as a tool to gauge your entry in on the opponent or cover your retreat. And that's pretty much most of the usage of this normal. Like I would just like use it as a tool to either approach, retreat, or snipe out their buttons when we're in aerial combat. So, and that's pretty much it with jump, medium punch.
Yeah.
Jump.
You'll probably find yourself using this one the most in neutral. But yeah, moving on to jump heavy punch. A little slower than jump medium punch, but still pretty good for an air normal. It starts up on the 10th frame. It's active for 6 frames. There's 2 separate hitboxes for it, a shorter one and a more extended one, and then 23 frames of recovery. So the most important thing with this move is, well, there's 2 things. First is the trajectory. It hits more, it hits at a sharper angle than medium punch does, kind of right below him. And the hitbox is also his best air to ground jumping normal. This will stuff a lot of things that the other person is doing. You can also, because of the angle that it comes out as, you can kind of do it as a not instant overhead, because Anakaris doesn't have anything with the way his jump works that's similar to that, but it hits at a very sharp angle below him. So you can throw this move out at an angle or at a timing where that might be a little bit different than a pyramid dive that an opponent would be expecting. And afterwards you can follow up with an actual pyramid dive, and sometimes the double overhead is it takes them a little bit of time to get used to, but it'll do a pretty good job of stuffing a lot of things that they're doing directly below him. This is his strongest air to ground hitbox for jumping moves.
Yeah, utility-wise, I found myself not really opting to use this move until I seen Sako kind of use it a little bit in one of his videos. Primarily, he does use it as an air-to-ground tool, but it's mostly to cover this dive kick, which we'll get to later. But it's to keep them guessing, because a lot of opponents will want to stuff your dive kick, or sometimes you might even be in a terrible angle where your dive kick will actually be minus. So sometimes you have to opt to use this jumping heavy to get the frames back that you need to continue your pressure.
Yeah, so some of the situations would be like if you're floating very high, kind of directly above your opponent, and if you do a dive kick immediately, it'll be too high in the air to really utilize it. So you want to use this to kind of cover yourself, let yourself get a little lower, and then follow up with a pyramid dive. So it's useful for that, as it's got a pretty strong hitbox for that purpose.
Yep, and that's pretty much it with jump heavy. Now we're gonna get to the oddball of this jumping series, the kicks.
Yeah, so these are weird in general because of how they work. But we were talking about all of his jumping punches just now, although if you don't play Anakaris, you might have thought it was a little strange. All the moves that he's doing are kicks in the air. As you can see now, probably Mar is showing you what his actual kicks look like. They come up from the ground and fill the whole screen with giant hurt boxes that cover everything. So the first one of these, jump short, is...
Oh god. Yeah, there's a graphical bug with those.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Jump short is probably Anakaris' weirdest normal overall. I'm convinced that there was some mistake or accident when they made this and they didn't really think about it. So it starts up on frame 19. It's his slowest jumping move by a significant amount. Frame 19. It's active for 3 frames and has 17 frames of recovery. I have no idea why it takes that long to start up. It's not really useful for anything. It's got a hitbox that's pretty... It's just a worse hitbox than jump medium kick, which also has an additional hit behind it that covers it. I think this is probably Anakaris' worst normal in the whole game. I have no idea what to do with this move. Okay. Try to avoid using it, I would say.
Yeah, so like, as Holder was explaining, this move has a massive startup, and a lot of his kick normals cause a giant blue hurt box to appear, where they can preemptively hit you out of it. This normal is incredibly slow. There is the only benefit to using this normal over all the other ones is actually how slow it is, because of how slow it is. When you're using this while you're coming down, you might actually be able to aim this and get the jump in to hit deep enough so that you can get a combo off of. But overall, that's probably not going to happen. You can probably just use one of these to do the same objective anyway, and it'll give you better results, and it's much safer to do those. But that's the only use it has. It's not good at doing anything else as far as the jumping kicks are concerned. It doesn't have much coverage. It's too slow, and you're usually gonna get hit out of it. So the only use it has is for that one situation where I need something super slow, and that's it. That's all you can do with this normal.
Yeah, as Mar mentioned, this is a weakness that all of his kicks have that you have to consider, is that because they all come up out of the ground and they fill the whole screen up with a giant blue hurt box, you get hit out of these a lot. Like, even if the other person is just doing a sweep or something, trying to poke at medium range, and you do a jump kick, you'll get swept out of your jumping attack. That it feels bad. So be careful whenever you're using any of these kick moves because of how vulnerable it leaves Anakaris. It's really hard not to hit him if there's a hitbox going around when he's doing one of those.
Yes. Now we're gonna move on to jump medium kick.
Okay, jump medium kick. This is probably your second most useful button in the air after jump strong. So there's only 2 jumping normals left, and I said there were only 2 jumping attacks that were as fast as jump jab. This is one of them. It's active on the 7th frame, the same as jump jab. This has 2 hitboxes. So the first one, it starts on the 7th frame, it's active for 9 frames. Then there's a 3-frame gap. And then the second hitbox starts and it's active for 6 frames. And then there's 14 frames of recovery. So this move is the closest thing Anakaris has to an air chain. Anakaris is unique in the game where he can't chain moves in the air, where every other character can. And it would look really weird if he could. So if you want to do something that starts up fast and comes at that angle, the hitbox is actually better for both hits than jump short. It's the hitbox is extended a little bit past his hurtbox there. If they're kind of in front of you or above you, this is probably one of the better ones to use. It does have 2 hits, so it covers you for a longer period of time than most of his other normals do. So you kind of want to use it for either if they're going to be above you or you're... So one use is if they're air blocking and you want to kind of keep them blocking long enough that you can land and do something. This is the closest thing you have to being able to do that. An air chain into a guard break with Anakaris is do a couple of these in the air as they're landing and they're blocking.
Yeah, this is the air chain into guard break situation that he was talking about. If Anakaris is at this position right here, and as long as you can sneak this in and you get low enough, you can potentially set up a situation where he'll land and he'll be able to do a normal just in time. Very rare situation, but you'll see it from time to time. So it's best to
it's the closest thing he has to being able to do a normal guard break setup. So especially in the corner, it's something to watch for. Maybe if you're jumping at them and they're in the air at an angle where you can't really do a dive kick that risks getting hit out of whatever normal they're doing, you don't have a lot of options except for something that hits kind of above you or next to you. This is going to be one of the 2 things you want to use, depending on the situation.
Yes. And very similarly to jump light kick, you will also be using it on your descent to sometimes sneak in a combo or something. It's another one of those rare situations where it becomes really useful, specifically since it's 2 hits. That makes it a little bit easier to confirm off of than jumping light kick. But it's also a little faster, so you got to be careful when you do throw it out. And,
so yeah, initially it's faster, but because it is 2 hitboxes, the second one comes out fairly late.
Yeah.
But
yeah, if you do it a little bit too late, it's a little more difficult to hit confirm off of it. But there's a sweet spot for it. But
yeah.
Just for that. But most of the time you'll be using it to stuff out an opponent performing a chicken block, which is just air guarding, and they're gonna hit a button. If they hit their air button a little bit earlier, they might just accidentally get hit. But that usually
there is a gap. There's a gap.
Yeah, that usually comes from a situation where, like, you're throwing out a couple other buttons and you're like, I'm gonna stuff jump medium punch, and you do this instead, and they might accidentally fall for it. But if they block it, both the hits, they're gonna get a free. Pretty much, it's pretty free to hit them out of this chicken block situation. So it's just kind of like the opponent kind of hitting the button too early sort of situation. But that's pretty much it for the jumping medium kick.
Yeah.
So now we're on to the last jumping normal.
All right, jump roundhouse. This is very similar to jump medium kick in a couple of ways. First, the startup is the same. So it starts up on the 7th frame, the same as jump medium kick, the same as jump jab. Those are your 3 fastest jumping normals. It's a little bit of a weird group there. It's active for 9 frames. It has a 23 frame recovery. This is your strongest air-to-air hitbox by a pretty significant margin if they're above you in the air or next to you in the air. The portion of the hitbox that's not exposed, your hitbox is not exposed. The hitbox sticks out quite a bit. It's pretty good. The downside, though, is that unlike medium kick, it's only 1 hit. So if they block it in the air, you're kind of just stuck there with this move and 23 frames of recovery, and they're probably going to air reset you and then do some pressure, and you're going to not be real happy about that. But if you do anticipate having to deal with a move that they're going to be throwing out, this is your best bet at beating that.
Yeah, this normal is pretty much it's like it's just basically an air-to-air tool, and you're going to use it very similar to the sniping method of jumping medium punch, but it'll definitely cover, like, if you don't think you're going to be able to get this to hit for whatever reason, you might be able to use jumping heavy kick instead for that kind of situation. But again, all these air normals are air blockable, so you have to be careful and make sure your opponent is hitting a button, because if not, you might get chicken guard and hit because of them. All these jumping kick normals are susceptible to getting chicken guarded and getting hit. So, but this normal is really, really fast, so it makes it kind of worth throwing out every once in a while.
So
the only other
reason,
the only other weakness besides the jumping light kick and the jumping medium kick is that the jumping heavy kick is really terrible at hitting grounded opponents. A lot of characters can duck under it, so that's the only weakness to this. Besides, it being really awkward normal to use, but overall, it's a great air-to-air normal.
So one situation that Anakaris will frequently encounter with kind of jumping around and chicken blocking himself, being afraid to be on the ground, is that other characters will jump in his face and do full air chains.
Oh, yeah.
This is his best option to punish those characters. If they finish their air chain, you see them do their jump roundhouse in the air, and you stop blocking, you can do a move now. This is your best option for that. It's one of his fastest starting up moves. It does the most damage for a single hit. It has a good hitbox to ensure that if they were up next to you doing air chains, they're definitely going to get hit by this. So in that situation, after they finish doing their full air chain, you want to be using this move to get your air reset and then start something afterwards. That's the main niche that this thing has.
Yeah. And I think that covers it with the jumping normals. Now we're going to move on to one of his main mix-up tools, the pyramid dive.
Yeah, so in addition to, like, we were talking about his stand jab just being a tool to kind of hold people down, crouch short, as a low to mix people up. This is the other side of that equation. His pyramid dive is a mix-up. So first, Anakaris has one weakness that most other characters in the game do not have. It takes a very long time for him in the air to be able to do a move. Most characters have to wait maybe 4 frames or so. I don't remember exactly for normal characters. After they jump in the air to be able to perform an action. Anakaris has to wait 15 frames after he's jumped in the air to perform an action. And then on top of that, the startup for Pyramid Dive, at least the diagonal version, is 13 frames. So the fastest it can become active is 13 frames after it starts up, and an additional 15 frames after you jumped on the ground. So 28 frames of startup is the fastest you can do a Pyramid Dive from leaving the ground. So it's not actually very fast. A lot of people, I think, don't realize how slow a diagonal Pyramid Dive is. It is, however, still quite useful. Like we mentioned before, his jabs on guard +7. That gives you some frames to work with. And the Pyramid Dive is a mix-up option that leaves you pretty plus, usually. If you're doing it on the ground, you're not too far above them. Then you have options to continue to pressure. If it hits, you get a full chain. It moves you forward, which is, a big thing. Because you can get in with overheads while keeping close to the opponent to follow up with other things.
And then he has an alternate version too, as well.
Yeah. So he has the a straight down version and a forward version. There's a couple of differences with them. One being hitbox, but second is frame data. So the down version starts up much faster. It starts up on the 9th frame. The downward version, as you get more used to playing Anakaris, you'll probably find is a little bit more useful. Whether or not you can actually hit someone with it consistently, it depends a little bit on the matchups, because some characters will kind of push you back a little bit, and you won't be able to immediately do a down one right next to them. As you can see with him jumping there, you have to kind of be above him for it to work. But what it is useful for is one of Anakaris' main mix-up options is not actually getting someone, jabbing someone and then doing a high or low. It's whiffing a high. This is when it becomes difficult to see what Anakaris is doing. So going between like jump and then diagonal pyramid dive at someone, forcing them to block it, or jump vertically down pyramid dive into a low can be very difficult for people to see. They see the pyramid dive start up, they instinctively block high, and then the low comes very fast afterwards. This is the main mix-up that Anakaris has.
No, there is no difference between the buttons that you use. I usually just piano them when I.
But there is actually one difference. The heavier versions build more meter.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That's the only difference. Like Mar said, you probably want to piano it just to ensure that you actually get the move.
Yeah, I usually just piano it just to ensure that I get it, because like you'll come to learn. We'll get to that in a second about meter usage, but getting the pyramid dive is a lot more important usually. But yeah, overall, like this is one of your key components to the character. You use it for either performing overheads or closing in distance, but you can also use it as a tool to gate, like to stop, people from reading you. There's a lot of utility with this move overall, and the fact that it's an overhead accompanies everything that like it seals the deal. Like with this character, he has a ton of variety of ways that he can approach and attack because of both his normals on the ground and his dive kick. You can use it. It gives him a lot of versatility on how he wants to attack. He's one of the most versatile characters that you'll find in this game with offense, or even like some forms of defense, just like grounded normal defense or like that. But overall, the usage of these tools will enhance the likelihood that you can survive the matchups.
Yeah, most characters in the game are kind of divided between either being focused on more dash pressure style characters that kind of overwhelm you with frame advantage, or characters that utilize high-low mix-ups a little bit more. Anakaris is both. He can do both a lot, so he's very versatile that way. But another thing that the pyramid dive is very good for, as you probably noticed earlier when we were going over the jumping normals, his jump is very floaty, and it leaves him very exposed. So the pyramid dive, especially the grounded pyramid dive, can be very important in making sure that you land quickly in order to do something. This is what makes changes his jump from just being terrible into being pretty usable, is that he can actually get himself on the ground fast if he needs to. Just being able to force himself down is pretty important. Another thing about the pyramid dive is that it's active until he hits the ground, but if you do it too high in the air, he'll actually recover from it. Not recover from it, but like he'll land on the ground too fast for some characters to block. So for example, against QB, if she's crouching on the ground and you start a diagonal pyramid dive from very high in the air, it's possible that it won't even hit her, and you'll be in some trouble then. So you don't want to do them too high most of the time. It's also possible against characters who are taller or just standing. If you hit the tip of them too high in the air with the pyramid dive, it's possible that they could punish you with a throw or something afterwards, because you don't actually have enough frame data or frame advantage to do something if you hit them too high in the air.
Yeah, that will particularly happen very much so in the Sasquatch match the most, where you accidentally hit them a little bit too high and you get thrown, and you might just lose right out for that one mistake. So be very careful with hitting the dive kick a little bit too high. Always try to aim it around the midsection of the character, and you should generally be fine if that's the case. And then if the downward one about the downward one, as we were showing, it will whiff if the character's basically a rectangle shaped character. So like Dimitri right here, this will probably never hit him, but like a character like Queen Bee who's really fat, she'll definitely get hit by this. So you can opt to use the downward pyramid dive instead. But if they're ducking, this move will always hit, and it's super fun to hit people with.
If you're right in their face, and you should pretty much use that if it's safe to do so, because like I said, it starts up much faster, and it's harder to see what the mix-up is going to be afterwards.
Yes, that's pretty much the utility of all his normals. And
But there's one, I guess, a little bit of an additional thing with his pyramid dives, because they're very active. If you do them in the air, there's some situations in which they can be useful, well, particularly against Gallon. So if you're kind of full screen, to prevent Gallon from just doing beast cannons into you. A diagonal pyramid dive will actually beat beast cannon fairly consistently, in my experience, because of how active it is. The first hitbox is not bad.
I can kind of go into that matchup maybe. Let me give this a switch.
Okay. So from full screen, it's something that you can be doing to kind of keep him on his toes about that, and not just allow him to get in for free, because it is very active.
Let's see if I can manipulate this. It's going to be a little difficult with the two controllers. Just got to get in the air. Yeah, he'll probably have to do it a little early, but yeah. But it is. I can see that being highly useful in this situation. A little difficult for me. That one's kind of difficult. So
a little something to watch out for. If it's the hitbox is decent and it's very active, so it can, if you're kind of at full screen and you need to present a hitbox, it can be useful for doing that. Just holding some space right in front of you to keep them from just going in on you with abandon.
Bad move. Well, man, that's pretty much it with his normals. So we can move on to special moves now.
All right. So let's see.
Let's start off with
one do you want to start with?
Let's start off with Cobra Blow.
Okay, Cobra Blow. Cobra Blow is pretty easy to start off with, because a lot of the things that are relevant to Cobra Blow were relevant to Stand Fierce. A lot of the things we said about Stand Fierce are similar also to Cobra Blow. There are 3 versions of Cobra Blow. The heavier versions extend further. They do multiple hits. If it's air unblockable, if you get a reset in the air, it knocks down. So if someone is jumping, not a reset in the air, I'm sorry. If you hit someone in the air, it'll knock down. So you can get a pursuit afterwards. This can be pretty useful. It's kind of like just a souped up version of Stand Fierce. You want to use it in similar situations, maybe from further away against characters jumping. You can also use it kind of preventatively if you anticipate someone is going to want to kind of up back or jump in the air. You can throw this out. This will keep them from doing that. And then, different from Stand Fierce, you actually do get a pursuit afterwards, or a whiff pursuit into some kind of other pressure that you would like to do. Against tall characters, or if you can confirm them standing, one of his better combos is multiple jabs into Cobra Blow, or ES Cobra Blow. But that doesn't happen that often. You really do have to. It's a little bit more damage than a full chain. It's not really worth potential error effort, I think, but it's something. If you're in a situation where you really need every pixel of damage you could get, you might want to look for Cobra Blow combo. The ES one is just bigger, does more hits.
All right. Hey, Jose. This ain't
some frame data, real quick. The startup on all the versions is 10 frames, but the only difference is that the longer ones have additional hits added on after it. Each hit is active for 6 frames, so the jab version has 2 hits on it. The medium version is 3, then Fierce version is 4, and then the ES version has 6.
No, I think I think it is. I think Gallon's just weird.
So it's 6 hitboxes. Yeah, Gallon is weird.
He's very
the
weird.
recoveries are longer. So jab version 21 frames, medium punch 29 frames, Fierce version 32 frames. They're fairly minus. So The jab version, -2 on hits, -3 on block. It's not terrible. The medium punch version, -10, -11. Fierce, -12, -13. ES version on hit, it knocks down. On block, it's -13. So you mostly want to be using these against people that you think are going to be in the air.
Yes. Yeah, as stated, these are usually used to stop people from, doing any preemptive jumping or something. Or like if you're really far and the opponent committed to a jump and you think you can squeeze this out and you're really far away, you might be able to get away with it, especially in this matchup. Very useful in this matchup because Talbane's neutral jump options are very strong, and so are his ability to do beast cannons. Sometimes you just can't reach in that position, so you might be able to sneak in your Cobra Blow as a tool, like to stop him from neutral jumping before he gets up there. But
even if you trade, it's good because you get a knockdown.
You do get a knockdown, so it's another useful thing about that situation. But overall, you'll mostly be using it in the same way you'll use it as standing heavy punch.
One thing about this move is every character in the game can crouch this, except for Bishamon and Victor. So against characters crouching, if you're just whipping it, that'll be a problem for you. In those matchups, Bishamon, it's not particularly useful because mid-screen is going to be dominated by a lot of his really good normals and his fireball, things like that. It's very useful against Victor. Victor has a lot of trouble dealing with this move. His best option really is to guard cancel it. If they are blocking it, it's pretty guard cancel bait. It does a lot of hits. It's very easy to guard cancel. But it can really stop him from coming in at you. It'll beat him jumping if he's not doing like instant jump jab or something like that. It'll catch him out of his jump. If he's trying to advance at you on the ground at all, this will just push him back full screen. Victor has a very hard time dealing with that move.
Yeah. I think that's pretty much it with the Cobra Blow, right? I don't think it has any more.
Yeah, most of what we talked about with it was, we mentioned before with how you use Stand Fierce. This is kind of just a bigger version of that for different ranges.
It's just like a souped up Stand Fierce that you can do at different ranges.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the command grab. Mirror drop.
Command grab. All right. So this is an interesting one. Anakaris' specials overall aren't as good as his normals overall, where he has some very good normals. Most of his specials are merely okay, and you kind of just have to bring them all together and use the little advantages that you get from each of them in little situations. And they're mostly okay. This one is not. The regular version of this move, the command grab, you pretty much never really want to do.
Hey,
the reason being is that you can crouch it for some reason. So they have to be exactly standing. If they're jumping, obviously they won't get hit. And if they're crouching, they won't get hit. So they have to be standing. Really, the only reason or way to use this move is if you really have a hard call on them walking back, kind of full screen. Or sometimes you can use it as a punish for something if they're going to be too far away to get in and do a chain combo and you just want to grab them. One thing about the normal version is that you can switch sides with it. After you grab them, you can force them to side switch, which is not something that the ES version has. The ES version of this move is actually very good because it can hit crouchers. Significant difference. Also, instead of starting up at a specific location, as you can see, Mars probably doing different versions of the hands. The light punch version of the hands. The light punch version of the hands appears kind of right in front of him, and then the heavier buttons will appear further down the line. The ES version just starts close to him and then extends outwards. But the fact that it can grab crouchers is really what's important about it. So the ES version starts up on the 22nd frame. So that's going to be a little bit faster than, for example, forward medium kick as an overhead option. As a mix-up thing, it's a little bit faster than that. It's faster than you can do a pyramid dive. You can, because it's a special move, you can cancel a light into it, which gives you additional frame advantage, more than just the regular +7 that you would get on block. So the other person has less time to actually do something to get out of it. So it can be very good for that. Especially the closer you are, the better it is. Ticking into ES hands is a very, very strong tool that Anakaris has, but you pretty much never want to do the regular version of this move.
Oh yeah. The regular version of this move, you will probably never hit unless it's like a fireball situation against fireball characters, or unless the opponent accidentally walks back into it, which can happen from time to time, but not really a strategy to rely on. Most of the time, the generic response for the opponent is usually going to be to jump towards you, and that's a bad situation to be in. So you'll mostly use the EX command grab, which, as was explained, can be used off of your normals. You can cancel into them, meaning that you can use them to make this already really versatile pressure strings even better, because you can add a grab off of it. Another good thing to note about this is that, as explained earlier, jumping in this game leaves you in landing recovery for about 2 frames. So those 2 frames are what it's needing to do an anti-air command grab, in which the opponent cannot re-jump. They will get grabbed by it if they jump in the air, meaning that you can use this as an anti-air in some instances. Not the regular one, but just the EX one.
Alright, so some other things about this move is that in order to get the full damage out of this, you really have to mash. You don't have to worry about side switching or anything with the ES version. The ES version will always keep you on the same side that you were when you grabbed the opponent. So you want to mash as much as possible to get the most damage. Now, of course, the opponent can countermash that to reduce the damage, and if they're doing so effectively, they really do reduce a lot of the damage that it does. But this is still a really good option because of just the extra layer of mix-up that it does provide. Like Mar said, you can use it, it's kind of an anti-air because of the 2 frames of landing recovery. This is also applicable to situations where someone does something that's very difficult to punish on the ground. For example, Dimitri Demon Cradle. It can be an option to grab characters because it's so active and it's traveling out there. It does decent damage for a punish option in situations like that if you're looking for something.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty much what the grounded command grab. Overall, this is going to be one of your primary tools you'll use with meter. That's where majority of your meter will be spent.
Yeah, you mostly want to do it right next to someone. If for some reason it misses, you do have to wait for the hands to travel their full distance, and then you'll recover, and that's a very long time. You're definitely going to get super punished for that. So you don't want to be doing them too much because whipping them can be a disaster.
Also, like, the general mentality for usage of this thing is to, like, generally you'll be utilizing Anakaris' pressure strings, and this is to force the opponent into staying on the ground for as long as possible. And when you do think they're going to stay there, that's the timing of when you want to use this tool. You don't want to just immediately go into this tool because it is possible to jump this command grab and punish him completely. You just want to, keep the opponent guessing for as long as possible, and when you do feel that they're going to commit to blocking, that's the time that you use the EX command grab.
Yeah, like we mentioned earlier, Anakaris has the tools to really deal with whatever situation your opponent, or whatever your opponent is trying to do to escape. So if you see that they're doing a lot of jumps, you have, stand strong to stop that, or forward medium kick, you have options to do that. And eventually, if they're a smart opponent, they'll catch on to that and they'll stop doing their patterns. And once their patterns change, then you can start using whatever tool it is next most appropriate to deal with what they're doing. And Anakaris can really adapt himself offensively to whatever the opponent is doing defensively. That's one of his major strengths.
Yes.
I think.
Let's move on to, well, I need a different character for this move, but I will switch to a different character. Let's move on to the projectile absorbing move.
Okay.
I will attempt, I'm gonna attempt to catch this thing.
Wait, which character are you going against?
I am using Jeddah.
Jeddah, okay.
Okay,
so
I caught it.
This is actually one of the more unique things about Anakaris. Anakaris has a move that will swallow projectiles that the opponents throw. So the swallow starts up in 3 frames. It's very quick. And then the actual duration of the part that swallows the move is 10 frames. So there's a 10-frame window that you have to collide with the projectile in order to catch it. Once you've caught it, you have access to that projectile for the rest of the match, or until you swallow a different projectile, which can happen sometimes. The recovery is 57 frames after this move, which It's quite a long time, but in certain matchups, if you're pretty guaranteed to get the item safely or the projectile safely, it's best to do so. There's not really a downside. You can take an air reset or something if you have to. Having access to the projectile most of the time will be enough of a benefit that you're willing to risk it. In some matchups, it's easier than others. Although a lot of the easier matchups have less useful items. For example, Dimitri. In the Dimitri matchup, it's extremely easy to catch the projectile because of the way that they typically throw them, although it's not as useful there as some of the other ones. You can see here, this is one of the better ones, the Jeddah wheel. So imagine if Jeddah had a knockdown on his sweep and what he could do with setups with the wheel and stuff like that, but he doesn't. Anakaris does have a sweep that does knock down. He has knockdown chains, so he could use the wheel pretty nicely once he gets it. This is probably one of the better items that he can pick up. One interesting thing about the spit, when you do grab the item and then you throw it out, the frame data for all moves in the entire game that he swallows is the same for him. So this can make them a little bit worse or a little bit better. So it starts up in 24 frames startup, and then 22 frames of recovery. For some moves, for example, Anakaris' own curse. This makes them far better than the regular version. We'll talk about that.
I will actually go into that and go get it.
Okay, so this actually, we could probably talk about just curse here kind of at the same time.
Yes.
Since we're doing that. So first, I'll tell you about how this other move, curse, is used.
I'll use the regular one for right now.
Okay, so first, this move is actually, it has very long startup is the main initial weakness of it, but it's a pretty good move, I think. You're pretty much always going to want to use the jab version of this move. Well, let me explain about it first. So you can see it's a diagonal projectile there that he throws. He can only do it in the air. He can't do it on the ground. On hit, though, it will transform the opponent into a unique thing depending on which character you're fighting against. But all of them have some things in common, that they can't attack. The only things that they can do is they can move around and they can jump. There are some differences between how they move around. Some characters are flying in the air, some characters are standing on the ground, but they can move forward or backwards and move up or down. But they're pretty helpless against pretty much against most every character. There's a standard attack string that you could do after hitting with this move that will give you additional damage. So the differences between the versions of the curse. First is the jab one is, well, they all have the same startup. They all start up in 13 frames, and then but the recovery is massively different. So the jab one has the shortest recovery with 47 frames. That's the shortest one. You pretty much always want to do that in neutral. It will have the longest, it'll have the shortest actual duration that you leave the opponent cursed if they do get hit by it. But the way that you're going to be using the regular version of this move in neutral is mostly just to cover space. Now you can see it travels a little bit slowly, so you can approach behind it. It has a nice diagonal hitbox that covers a lot of the screen that'll keep the opponent just from being able to run in willy-nilly and doing whatever they want. So it's very much a space control tool. So you want to utilize the jab version as has the shortest recovery. It gives you the greatest chance of, or the greatest opportunity to follow behind it and do additional attacks. The medium and heavy versions you pretty much don't want to ever use. They have 63 and 79 frames of recovery respectively. They do give you longer curse duration, but the additional curse duration is not really worth the additional recovery that you're going to incur there. The ES version, however, is a much longer duration curse than the other ones. So the risk reward becomes a little bit more in favor there, even though it also has 79 frames of recovery, the same as the Fierce version. Because of the benefit that you get from landing it, it can be worth it sometimes. Against certain characters, QB and Jeddah, they have flying forms, which can't get beneath stand strong. So if you curse QB or Jeddah with the ES curse in the corner, you can take a whole bat, by just doing stand strong in the corner. So like I said, the curses have different durations for each version, but the counter stops counting down while they're being hit during hit stop. So the more you hit them, the longer it will actually last. So it's important to be able to have whatever pattern it is for the correct opponent. Against most of the characters who stay grounded, you're just going to want to do stand short. You can do stand short in the corner at a timing, or mid-screen you can do stand short, dash short, and then you can keep doing that, or stand short, 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 dash short, and walk them all the way to the corner, and you can do that there. Against QB or Jetta, you want to do stand strong. Stand strong will always hit them. They can't avoid it. Some characters get a little weird. So Morgan, Lilith, Dimitri can move up and down in their flight forms. They can actually move below the lowest hitbox for stand strong. So you have to mix up a little bit between stand strong and stand forward to hit them there. So it's a little bit less reliable against those characters. For players who are not playing Anakaris, if you get cursed, one thing that you might want to try to aim for to avoid taking a bunch of extra damage is kind of trying to get, not behind him exactly, but kind of inside his hitbox. That'll make it difficult to for him to hit you there. He has to dash, and then there's a little bit of a mind game there about how you're going to move and try to avoid. So that's kind of the basic mechanics of just the curse itself, if there's anything you want to add to that.
Nope, that's pretty much it. Like, generally, you'll be using the jab curse. You can use the jab curse from full max range, and you might be, depending on the situation and how generous the opponent is, you might be able to sneak in some frame advantage from it, like using your jump medium punch, or even your dive kick. You might be able to get in and use that frame advantage from the fireball. But generally, you're gonna just use the jab one or the EX one as filler moves for neutral, because you're just kind of like trying to slow down the pace sometimes. So you just need these moves to come out. Have something on the screens just to kind of halt the action. But if they do get hit by it, then you just take advantage of the situation. And it really can turn the tides if it does hit. However, these moves have weaknesses in matchups where the character has an air dash. If a character has an air dash and air guards it, they can chicken block and air guard, and Anakaris is very susceptible to getting hit in those matches. So be careful against characters like Jetta. When you use these curses, especially the EX curse, you're definitely going to get hit every time if you do EX curse and he air block this. But if he does get hit, he's dead. Yeah,
EX curse, very much of a Hail Mary. It's very risky to do, but high risk, very, very high reward.
Yeah.
An additional thing about the ES curse, as you can see there, is that it actually is 3 different projectiles. It kind of mostly acts as one projectile at the beginning as it's just coming out of Anakaris' mouth, but the further down it goes, the farther they'll get split apart. Sometimes you'll have situations where as they become separate, one will get negated by a fireball or something, but the other ones are still going to be active and the opponent won't realize that and they'll get hit by it. So in order for them to really act as 3 separate projectiles, you have to wait for them to spread out a little bit.
And let's move on to the second, the special curse.
So there is a time where you can use versions other than the jab curse. In the Anakaris mirror, or against Lele, if she happens to gong and reflect a curse at you and you manage to swallow it, you can shoot a version of the curse that has much less recovery. And all the versions have the same startup and recovery. So once you have this, you pretty much always want to be using the fierce version, or roundhouse version, because you use kicks for that. So if you do hit them, then they'll be cursed for a long time. You get a lot of damage from it. If you don't hit them, it's fine, because you recover quick enough that you can land and you can do mix-ups and even combo into it as it's coming down behind you, or it's just an amazing tool to cover you as you're just playing the game. In the Anakaris mirror, you generally want to avoid ever throwing a regular curse if possible because of this. The risk of the other Anakaris eating this move and then using it against you is extremely dangerous. And once they have it, it can be very dangerous for you to try to swallow it back, because they recover fast enough that they'll be able to either hit you before you can have a chance to swallow it, or as you're swallowing it and you'll eat a whole chain combo. This move is extremely good. So be very careful with that. It's a little bit rare. It's more rare to get it in the Lele matchup where she gongs a curse, but They do sometimes because they, if you throw a lot of curses, they like to show, look, I'm gonna do this. They like the idea of maybe cursing Anakaris with his own curse, which I see people do probably more than they should, and in a situation where then you can swallow it and then they're in for a world of hurt. Because you can just throw these extremely good projectiles that on hit or leave you with a lot of extra damage on the table, or otherwise just cover you to do like 2 or 3 mix-ups even with how much time they give you. I would say this is easily the best version of a move that Anakaris can swallow.
Yeah. Tons of reward from it. So he actually gets way more powerful in the mirror or in the Lele matchup. Let's see, what's the next move? I think it's all EX moves at this point, right?
Do you want to talk about any of the other unique versions of swallowed moves that Anakaris gets?
Oh, sure, we can pull those up.
Well, just to talk about, I guess, the usefulness of the different moves. Like I mentioned earlier, Dimitri is very easy to swallow the projectile, but he doesn't get a lot out of using it. The most noticeable difference, actually, is the Lele matchup. That's one of the instances. That's one of the instances where he actually has a departure from the way the move actually works. Most of the moves work pretty much the same way. Here you can see Dimitri. You got 3 different versions of the fireball. There's some stuff you can do with that, like on hit. The bats will bite him, and you can follow up with dash moves into chains, things like that. The ES version works the same way. It's just an ES fireball. Lele's ES item is very different. So this is a good matchup for swallowing moves, because either she's reflecting her curses or she's throwing items, which she's going to be doing all the time anyway, because Lele wants to be able to generate a dizzy item. So you're going to have an opportunity to grab it. It's also not the most difficult item to get. It follows a general trajectory. Excuse me. Because she's usually going to be throwing the medium punch version. That's pretty good against stopping Anakaris because he's very tall. He can't really come in on that a lot. So if you're kind of up backing at full screen, you can anticipate that she's going to throw that sometime. So you can grab that fairly reliably. Once you have that move, Lele's ES version of her item toss is notoriously terrible. It doesn't combo in itself. It's very bad. Anakaris gets an extremely good version of the item toss where he tosses out all 3 versions of the item at the same time. So the first 2, which kind of travel more horizontally, is very plus afterwards. You can combo, you can link after the first 2, and then there's still the 3rd overhead item falling from the top of the screen.
Yes, I got the big combo.
So this is actually one of the only ways that Anakaris has to combo into his Feral Magic supers, is utilizing the extra 3rd projectile that's gonna fall down from the sky. The ES version of Lele's item is very good. Otherwise, this item is still pretty good, even if you're not spending a lot of meter on using the ES version in combos or whatever. As a neutral tool, it's pretty good, but Anakaris also gets fairly nasty with access to the overhead thing on knockdowns. He's probably better at doing all of the same like overhead low mix-ups in the corner after knockdown that Lele has. He's better at setting up kind of unblockable situations with the overhead item. Once he does have a dizzy item, there's some good stuff he can do with that. You can do some interesting combos with, throwing another fierce, then doing a pyramid dive, and then the item hits, and you do another pyramid dive, and you get a full chain. Although usually if you have the meter and you get a dizzy, the best thing to do that's safe is just ES curse. You ES curse her and you get a bunch of damage from that. But there's a lot of fancy combos that he can do in this matchup because of that.
Oh, come on, give me the item.
So this is probably one of the better matchups for swallowing things, because he has a lot of good uses for all the stuff that she gives him access to. And it's fairly simple to do. There's other items that we'll talk about that or not items, but projectiles that are much riskier to try to swallow, and the reward is very low for having them, so you generally avoid even trying it.
I'll go to one of those matchups. It's gonna be Lilith's Soul Flash.
Yeah, okay. So the reason Lilith's Soul Flash, well, first of all, it's very low range. She's only using it very close to you, and the recovery is generally pretty quick. She's gonna be able to punish you Lilith, very high damage character. Any punish that she gets is going to hurt a lot. He doesn't get as much from it because it's like you can still use it on her, like if you manage to grab one. As in the same situations that she would, as kind of like it's worse as a neutral tool, but you can use it more as like a way to set up a Oki setup with very meaty projectile into doing some things after it. But the frame data isn't as good. Like he doesn't have anything like she does with like TK Soul Flash, where she could really cover a lot of space and she recovers pretty well for it. It's mostly used as an Oki setup if he does get it, and because of the way it works, it's very difficult to actually grab. Yeah, so it stops his movement in the air. All the versions that he has, like the animations are the same. It's the same startup, same recovery, same animation for whatever projectile he's throwing out.
Yeah, overall, not a great projectile to grab, and very difficult. I've never grabbed this thing once in my 11 years playing of this character.
Not the most difficult projectile to grab, but one of the most difficult ones.
Yeah.
So you don't see it very often in this matchup, although it is a thing that potentially can happen, but not very common.
Let's see. Was there any other projectiles that you wanted to cover?
So most of them work similarly. A weird one though, like I mentioned right now, Soul Flash is not the hardest projectile to grab. The hardest projectile to grab is Baletta's Mine.
Oh yeah, I'm going straight to it.
So this is something that a lot of people don't even realize really counts as a projectile for this move. He cannot grab Fish's, or I'll talk about all the moves that he can grab after this. Mm-hmm. So first, it's possible for him to grab the mine. One way that you'll know whether he grabbed the move or not is when you do the move, there'll be a little kind of swallowing sound clip that plays, and you can tell that you've learned the move after that. So he gets access to this little projectile. It's okay. Like, it's definitely not worth the risk involved in trying to grab it. In this matchup, you can also grab the missiles. The missiles are okay. The missiles are pretty good to get because he has pretty good diagonal missiles in the air. So as he's jumping at her, he can kind of throw missiles, and it's not as good as grabbing the curse for himself, which, you know, has very high reward, but the missiles are also just a good option. It gives him a new space controlling tool that he has. Unlike Baletta, he doesn't have to charge for it. It's just a regular motion. So he can actually be pretty annoying with these missiles controlling space once he's got them. But so the moves that he can get, let me see if I can remember all of them on the first try, is so Dimitri's Fireball, first of all, against Albath, Fish, the fish character. He cannot grab the smoke, but he can grab the Sonic Wave. He can grab the Sonic Wave. This is generally not very good to do because the regular Sonic Wave is going to be active in the same situations that Lilith Soul Flash is. It doesn't have very good range. It's he's doing it right in front of him, kind of as part of frame trap or something. So if you try to grab it, you're just going to get hit. Occasionally, you can, if he's just going to do a full screen ES Sonic Wave, you might be able to grab that, but it's not terribly useful to have. He can mostly use it in the same way that Fish does, is with kind of frame traps once you're close to them. But so he can grab the Sonic Wave, but not the smoke. Against another one is he cannot grab Bishamon's projectile. Bishamon has a regular projectile, but he can't swallow that. So don't try, because you'll really be in trouble. Against Baletta, he can grab the missiles and the mine. Against Dimitri, he can grab his fireball. He cannot grab Cat Spike, Felicia's ball toss move. He can grab Jetta's wheel. He can grab Lele's items or Reflected Curse from her gong. He can grab Lilith's Soul Flash. He can grab Morrigan's Soul Fist. And that's it. Of course, he can grab his own curse.
Yep.
But yeah, that's the full list of things that he can grab.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Like, everything was accounted for, I think.
Okay. But most of those just work the same way that they would for the character. There's only a few that are weird. I guess also he's got an ES version of the mine. It's for no reason.
Yeah.
Which is something that Baletta doesn't have access to, so it's a little something extra. But most of them pretty much work the same way that the original versions work. Only the main departures are the Anakaris one, just because the frame data gets so much better with the curse, and then the Lele one, where the ES item is far better than poor excuse for an ES move there.
Yeah.
So I think that covers most of both the curse and the additional moves that you can acquire. If you have anything to add to that.
No, nothing more to add. I think that's pretty much it. Like, he has quite a bit of, he can use some characters' projectiles a little bit better, but most, mind you, whenever you do grab a projectile, the player's mentality may change to the point where they might do unexpected things because they don't know how to react to you having your projectile. So be advised that even though you will gain some advantages, the player might play a little bit different, and that can have an adverse effect on you winning the match because of it. But sometimes it does pay off. In particular, the Jetta matchup, the Lele matchup, or the
Anakaris.
Yeah, another Anakaris matchup. Those are probably the best to grab the items in.
Another thing, talking about mentalities, like Mara was saying, is you have to be careful about your own mentality.
Oh, yeah.
Just because you've grabbed the item, a lot of people, they just want to use the item a lot. In casual matches, of course, it's fine. But if you haven't played with the matchup with the item a lot and get a good feel about when to use it, when not to use it, a lot of players will want to just try to use the item as much as possible because they have a new tool, they want to use it. That can have an adverse effect on you winning the match. So
Yes.
Be careful not to overdo it.
That too. Very much so. I've been guilty of that as well. Many times.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fun. And he makes funny noises when he does it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So of course, in casual matches, if you grab something weird like, Balletta's mine here, go crazy with it. But if in a more serious match and you grab the item, don't let it get to your head that you have the item. Don't go crazy with trying to use it. Unless it's a stronger item like, Lele's or Jettas and there's an obvious route. Like, don't try to find uses for it in the middle of a match that you really want to win.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. On to the EX moves, I believe.
Well, we've got a little bit. I don't know if you want to count like the anti-pursuit portal as a special move.
Yes. Let me get.
We also have coffin drop still.
Yes.
I think.
Oh yeah, I forgot about coffin drop. Man, I use them so little.
Okay. Yeah. Mark didn't even remember that coffin drop is a thing.
I don't really use this move. It's not part of my arsenal. It's not like, even though I've been getting this a lot lately in tournament play, it's pretty much on accident. But it does have a lot of uses. So I'll let Hilder get into the data of the coffin drop.
Okay, so let's see. The coffin drop, all of the versions have the same startup. They start up in 25 frames, and then they have 43 frames of recovery. The only difference between all the regular versions, as you can see here with Mar, is that the location that the coffin drops is different. So it starts from jab. Jab coffin drop will drop the coffin as close to Anakaris as he can drop it, and then Roundhouse coffin drop will drop it as far away. So it goes in the same order that your chain combo does. One thing that's different about this game than in Vampire Hunter is if the opponent is at full screen, the Roundhouse coffin drop won't actually hit them. It hits about one character length in front of full screen. So you're only going to be able to hit it full screen if they're throwing something that extends their hurt box into where it is. This is kind of common in the Lele matchup. Like if you're doing a coffin and she throws an item, like she'll extend herself into it. So at full screen, it can only sometimes hit the other person. It's still pretty good to do, I think, as a neutral tool from full screen, because it approaches at a different angle than a lot of things, and it's actually pretty wide. For some characters, it can be a little bit difficult to get past it if you're doing it preemptively, kind of in front of them, and they're going to want to be jumping at you. Usually you want to do it kind of in front of where the opponent's going to be in case they come at you. You never want to do it in a situation where it could land behind them, and then you're just open to whatever they want to do while you wait for this thing to recover. Some additional things about it. It does hit overhead. If they're on the ground, they have to block it high. It knocks down on hit. You can do it in the ground and the air. There's a little bit of a difference between the ground and the air version. So the grounded version starts up in 25 frames, and the air version starts up in 29 frames. So it's a little bit slower in the air, but in the air you're less at risk of, like, the biggest thing that's going to happen to you generally is that you're going to get air reset or something like that. The grounded version does have the advantage of, if it does hit them, you don't have to wait to land and then do a pursuit. You can do a pursuit immediately. So it does allow for a greater possibility of following up after one. There's some matchups it's a little bit better in. As you can see, it comes from the top of the screen, so it hits a lot sooner if the character is going to be up in the air. Most notably, in the Anakaris mirror. Anakaris likes to float around the screen a lot, and he has that big hurt box that we talked about, so it's very easy to hit him. He's very scared of himself on the ground, and it pushes back a lot if they block it in the air, so a lot of the Anakaris neutral is about using this move.
Ironically, that usage is also similar to the MVC2 version of that matchup. A lot of coffin dropping in that matchup.
Yeah. So, yeah, there's a little bit difference between the air and ground version. It's very much a preemptive kind of neutral tool, hoping that someone will jump into it. Just to keep people on their toes, maybe use it every once in a while. It's not a very reliable or oppressive move to use constantly. The ES version of this move, however, should never be used. The ES version drops a bunch of coffins, it doesn't combo or anything. Usually the best thing that you can hope for is that they'll get hit by the last one or so and get knocked down and you won't get punished. If they get hit by the early ones, like, they'll be able to stand up and potentially punish you because you have to wait for the whole thing to finish, and it keeps going, and it doesn't do very much chip damage. Usually they get hit by like 2 or 3 tops, or they're blocked 2 or 3 tops. You pretty much never want to do the ES version of the move.
Yep, that move is terrible.
Yeah, real bad, that one.
Super bad.
One thing that you can use coffin drop for sometimes is as you're jumping in on someone, in a similar situation to how we talked about using jump fierce punch earlier, you find yourself close to the opponent, kind of too high to do a safe pyramid dive. In the air, it'll stop all your air momentum. For example, if they're in the corner and you're jumping in kind of at the peak of your jump arc and you're afraid that they might enter you or something and you want to start your pressure, you can stop yourself completely in the air, have this projectile fall on them, and if they're doing a button or something, of course, they're going to get stuffed. If they block it, then that gives you enough time to follow up with a pyramid dive afterwards. Sometimes a double overhead can be a little bit tricky for people to deal with immediately, but otherwise it allows for a safe approach with a pyramid dive. You can do it as kind of a meaty sometimes. It's pretty active, but that's not really... You really have to hard read how they're going to roll or react or something, so it's not very useful for that. It can hit very deep. So you get actually kind of pretty good frames if it hits quite deep. But sometimes it can be used in this similar situation to how we were talking about using jump fierce.
Another good thing about this tool is trading. As long as the projectile reaches past the ceiling, it'll continue to traverse the entire time. But if Anakaris gets hit too early, it won't. So if it gets through this, you could trade with this, and it might possibly save you in some situations where, like, you didn't have a button out, but this tool is going to come down and possibly save you.
There is a little bit of a mind game that goes on with it, because it does have kind of a long startup and you can see the animation for it pretty easily, but all of the versions have the same looking startup. So if there's kind of a pattern that you've been doing and then you do, so your opponent thinks, okay, if I just jump past this and I'll be able to punish him or something, and then you do a closer one, there's a little bit of a back and forth that goes on with which version of the move that you're doing a lot.
Yeah, overall, it's really good tool, especially for getting... Oh, thank you, Butterfing. But I have, like, terrible aim with this move, which is why I don't use it. It's not it's not to discourage the usage of this tool. I think it's an amazing tool. I just have bad luck with it, so I just opt to not use the tool. That's just me, a personal preference. But I do believe that it's a really amazing tool.
One thing that you might notice, Mar and I have kind of different opinions about how to play certain parts of the matchup. A lot of his Anakaris philosophy is sort of characterized by trying to just use what's most safe and effective and optimal for a situation, which is probably a little bit the better way to go. If we have two different ideas about something, you probably want to listen to him instead of me, because he actually wins tournaments sometimes. I'm a little bit more in favor of trying to utilize all the options that Anakaris has at any given time, and for any small amount of advantage that you can acquire from them, because he needs every little thing you can get. But it is a little bit more risky, so sometimes we'll disagree about things, not necessarily disagree, but have different takes on things. So if you're confused about that, just listen to more.
Not to discourage from the opinion, but like it is a good tool. I just have particularly bad luck with it, so in fact I have such bad luck that I even get a lot of EX coffin drops recently in tournaments, so like it kind of like discourages me from using the move in general, but I do think it's an amazing move for handling some situations where I probably should be using it a lot more, but I just haven't like designed a mentality to using the move a little more. But it should definitely be a move in your arsenal, especially for halting him in the air when you think they're going to try to do like a read just to hitting him. It's definitely good at doing that. So like mixing up between the coffin drop and jump medium kick is very good. Moving in a particular angle and using coffin drop to cover a position where you need it, or even getting them to chicken block it will push them right back to where they were just at. So it's a versatile tool. I just suck at using it for whatever reason. So, but you should definitely consider using putting it in your arsenal.
It's better in matchups where characters are going to be extending themselves horizontally a lot in the air. Like we said, it's very good against Anakaris, who's so wide in the air, and then a lot of the moves that he's doing in the air, like jump medium punch, extend him a lot. So there's a very high chance that you'll hit with it. You also have, it's better against some characters, like, for example, Jeddah, who either if he's doing air dashes or something, extends himself very wide, it's more likely that he'll get hit by it, or just the normals that he's kind of throwing out in the air extends him a lot. You'll have a little bit more success with some of those wider, slower characters. Against some characters, it's more difficult to use like that. So it's kind of a little bit of a matchup thing. If there's a higher chance that in their approach they'll get grabbed by it or get tagged by it, then obviously it's a little bit better. Some characters, a little bit too slippery for it.
Yeah. Let's move on to the pursuit attack. I mean the anti-pursuit attack.
Okay. So as I just mentioned, how Mar and I have sort of different ideas about things, this is probably our biggest departure. I am a huge proponent of doing this move. I definitely do it too much. I need to cut back on it, but I do think it's extremely strong. Reason being is Anakaris' biggest weakness in this game is that he just gets rolled over if people are able to attack him and continue their attacks. This is one way to kind of interrupt the normal flow of their attack pattern. They have to think a little bit more about what they're doing after knocking you down. If they're trying to just run, even if they're not doing a pursuit, a lot of just normal like dash meaties and stuff like that people are trying to do on you, they'll get grabbed by this. I think both the regular version and the ES version are very good. The differences are that the ES version is much more invincible. It's invincible for a very long amount of time. So the normal version, it's active for 48 frames, and then there's like very little recovery there. But the ES version is active for 93 frames. So that's a very big difference. If someone is anticipating you doing the regular version and they're going to try to do something to punish it, and you do the ES version, sometimes a lot of times people will just trip into this. Even very experienced high-level Japanese players I've seen, they'll just fall into this move because it really does interrupt the normal flow of what the opponent is trying to do. However, if this move gets baited, it's a free punish for the opponent. They get an additional knockdown into the same situation again. It's a little bit difficult for some characters to punish optimally because for some reason it's considered you get air reset after you get hit by, or after recovering from this, you get air reset. There is one frame that you can be hit standing at the very end of it, but most of the time it's best for someone to just sweep you, get a knockdown, they get the same situation again. There are some more advanced setups that people can do that will do a lot of damage. For example, if you whiff this in front of Lilith, she can do ES Soul Flash. The ES Soul Flash is meaty enough that it will hit the one frame standing that is there, and then she gets to do a chain into a LI. It's a lot of damage, so you have to be a little bit careful with using this move. It can be very unsafe, but I think representing it as something that you have and are willing to do is very important. Even if you only do it once in a matchup, the opponent's going to be thinking about it for the rest of the time. Every time they knock you down, they're going to second guess themselves a little bit about whether you're going to do this or not, especially if the pursuit would kill you. Representing this saves you a lot of the time. Not a lot of the time, a good amount of the time, though, when a pursuit would kill you and the opponent doesn't do it just because you represented the threat of this earlier in the match, you get to wake up and you have one more chance to not die. That's kind of my thoughts on it.
Yeah, I believe you have a lot more experience in utilizing this move, so...
That's a nice way of saying that I do it way too much and spam it all the time.
No, I mean, like, I mostly don't get a chance to use this move, because I'm trying to force my way in these positions. So, like, whenever I get knocked down, I'm like, oh, I got knocked down, and I'm not really thinking about using the move. On some occasions, I do use it, but it's not, like, particularly all the time. But I do agree with your assessment of the move and the philosophies of how to use it and what it's supposed to be used for. It's part of your arsenal. A lot of players are going to get really antsy and doing like perfect meaties and stuff, and just to generally put the Anakaris player in perpetual block strings and stuff like that. So like if they did do any sort of knockdown and they're going to rush you, you might be able to get away with this. And that's, you know, just something to consider. And also off knockdowns, a lot of players do definitely use pursuit attacks to get in. This will definitely stop them from using pursuit attacks for mix-up purposes. So that's another great usage for it.
Even other kinds of mix-ups that some characters will do on knockdown, for example, Morrigan might do like dash cross-ups, things like that. Anything that kind of crosses over you, it will really put a stop to other characters being able to utilize those kind of mix-ups on your wake-up, or they'll at least have to, there's an extra layer there. There's some risk involved in them doing that, so you don't have to deal with them as much if you represent this.
Overall, it's another additional tool for your arsenal to possibly save you, but also possibly get you killed. There's a chance for both, but don't let that discourage you from using the move or not using the move. It depends on the situation. It's all situational. It's a situational tool. But
an additional thing, especially about the ES version and with how long it lasts, even if it doesn't hit, is that you get to recover a decent amount of white life while you're invincible there because of how long you are invincible. Especially if you hit the opponent, there's no risk of you getting punished for it. You can recover a non-insignificant portion of white life while that's happening.
Yep.
It can also avoid certain things. For example, if so against Felicia, if she gets a knockdown, normally she can do just toy touch as a kind of OTG thing for extra damage. That's not something that this move will grab. She'll avoid it. But if you do the regular version and she does ES toy touch, for example, if she gets a knockdown and she would win, ES toy touch usually is very safe for her to do. The normal version of this move will avoid all of ES toy touch and recover at about the same time as her. So it's a way to avoid that. It's a niche thing, but just using the invincibility on it, not necessarily the hitbox, there is some use there.
Yes. I think that's pretty much it for that move, right?
I think so. I think that's all I've got about anti-pursuit.
Okay. Let's go.
Do we have any other special moves?
No, I think that's pretty much all of them, right?
What about guard cancel? Should we talk about guard cancel?
Okay, we can talk about this. This is fucking. Oh.
All right, so as I mentioned before, most of Anakaris' special moves are decent. They're not as good as his normal moves, but coming together, they can, there's something good about them. There's only a few that are really terrible. Like I said, normal version of hands, the ES version of coffin drop. This might be the most insultingly bad move that Anakaris has. So first of all, guard cancel is a universal mechanic in this game that everyone has access to. Anakaris kind of only half has access to it. He only has an ES version of a guard cancel. He doesn't have a meterless version. He can't do guard cancel at all if he doesn't have a meter. On top of that, the hitbox is a little bit weird. That's not a huge issue with it, but it's like a very specific vertical line around where Kaibit pops out. So sometimes it will whiff. That's not the biggest problem with it, though. The problem is that on hit, most of the time, it's punishable. The reason being is that you can see when it activates, the opponent turns into their little curse form, but the duration of the curse form is the same as Anakaris' recovery. So they recover at the same time as Anakaris, which lets them throw him for free. There's nothing he can do to avoid the throw. They can also move in that curse form, so if they're a little bit far away, and he does ES guard cancel, or just guard cancel, because that's the only one he has, they can walk closer to him to ensure that they do get the throw. There are some situations in which you can actually do it and won't be punishable. For example, if Jetta dashes at you from the max range and hits you with a tip of stand fierce, or dash fierce. Something that extends very far, like you could do that and you'll recover at the same time and he'll be too far away to throw you. In a situation like that, it's not punishable, but most of the time that you would want to use it when characters are doing some kind of infinite block string pressure on you, which you can do because Anakaris doesn't have access to a tech hit as a mechanic. You want to use something to get them off of you. Guard cancel is one of the only things he has to be able to do that, but if he does, they get to punish you for it. Still something that is probably necessary for you to try to do, because it's important for them to actually be aware of the fact that they can punish it and recognize that it happened. And it's when you're getting hit by some infinite block string pressure as an Anakaris, really the only thing that you can do is try to force your opponent into situations where they have to react a little bit differently than just running their standard pressure. There's still ways for them to continue their pressure on it, but you have to make the opponent have it, show that they are capable of doing it in all these situations. So that's something he's got. It's a really insulting excuse for a defensive option, though.
Yeah, it's very, very terrible. Like as you stated, the only usage for it is to kind of like just halt their pressure, because they're gonna just go into a throw. It's kind of, depending on the situation, it's probably much better to take a throw than to deal with the pressure, because you're not gonna be able to do anything about that. So it's kind of like you're kind of like choosing to, hey, I want to take a throw instead of this. Sometimes it's much better to do that, but the only other usage for the EX guard cancel is to get a kill. It is possible to kill with this thing, so like in those situations
it does do a little damage.
It does do a little bit of damage, but overall this thing, it's very insulting to have this tool.
Yeah, Mar summed it up pretty well there. The state of Anakaris defensive options. What you want to do is you do this move and then get thrown, because then there's greater opportunity for your opponent to make a mistake.
Yes.
They can still follow up and continue their pressure, but you provide pitfalls for them to fall into if they're not as completely equipped to deal with this. So you really need to try to provide as many opportunities for your opponent to make a mistake as possible when playing Anakaris.
You're just trying to pick your own poison to try to like get out of a situation and hope for the best. If you do get out of it, though, try to regain composure and try to get a life lead as fast as possible, or just get him away from you, and that can stabilize the match. And that might be all you need really to win. This is a very momentum heavy game, so despite the fact that he has a lot of defensive holes where he can't get out of, it only takes one block jab or one pressure string and you're back. You could be back in the game. And that should be it for EX guard cancel. So don't use it, but you might need to use it.
Yeah. Unfortunately.
Yeah. Let's see what's next. I think it's EX moves, so like the Portal and the Pharaoh's Magic series.
Okay. So Anakaris has 4 super moves. Really, it's only 2 super moves. One super move he has 3 versions of. So the portal, this is another move that Mar and I have a little bit different opinions on. I probably have less of a good reason for using this move because it's not a purely defensive option trying to scrape out advantage points. Portal is it provides an unblockable hitbox that goes all the way to the top of the screen at the cost of 1 bar. It appears at a consistent location in front of Anakaris. It starts up in 50 frames. So very long startup. It's active for 70 frames. And then it has a 45 frame recovery. I mostly use this move as a kind of mix-up option in the corner. When one of the options that your opponent's going to be thinking about a lot of the time is jumping back in the corner. Maybe they're anticipating ES hands or something. That's an option that you've been using, or just doing dash jabs and they kind of want to jump out and they're trying to do something about that. Doing stand jab into portal in the corner it's very unintuitive for a lot of players to react to. The optimal way to get out of it is to jump forward or dash forward at Anakaris, which can be a difficult thing to switch into immediately if you're in a defensive mindset. Your defensive option in this situation is to dash forward at Anakaris. If a character is upping or is jumping back and you do this move, most of the time they're going to get hit. Some exceptions to that are characters who have multiple options for movement in the air. So, for example, Dimitri or Galen, they can do something like bat spin or beast cannon as a reaction to it, and they'll avoid it. But it still can be a little bit difficult for a player to get used to it. I've have more success with this move, I think, than the immediate frame data would suggest you would have with it having a 50 frame startup. The fact that it's an unblockable hitbox that extends all the way to the top of the screen provides a little bit of a different access for an attacking move that you've got there. Pretty much, there's only one situation that I regularly use this move in outside of the corner, which is a little bit of a weird one. If you do a regular chain mid-screen as Anakaris, and the opponent has consistently been rolling forward afterwards, if you finish your chain with a sweep and immediately do portal, and they roll forward, they'll wake up into that 70 frame active hitbox, and it'll do some damage. It does a good chunk of damage, actually. The damage on this move is fairly high. So that's kind of my general thoughts about it. I think Mars is a little bit more reserved about using this movement. It's kind of dangerous. Why don't you talk about that, I guess.
I have pretty much the general same philosophies of how to use the move. I consider it more like the same usage of the...
It's more the amount of times he uses it, I guess. I use it all the time. He uses it very sparingly.
Yeah, I use it kind of sparingly because I kind of consider it like almost the same utility of EX command grab, right? It's the same mentality applies. Like, I always feel like, is my opponent going to jump? Maybe I should consider that. But most of the time, I'll opt to use EX command grab over it as my tool, unless I know the character doesn't have air OK actions. So like a character like Sasquatch, I might consider to use it a little bit more because he can't do anything once he hits the air. But like a character like BB Hood might double jump out of it. Jetta's gonna just air dash, So like there are like things that discourage me from using it, but like at the same time it's still a good tool to use as a trap of sorts after getting your knockdown or whatever. Like it still has its usage, or the opponent's just not reacting properly and they just get confused or whatever. It's definitely a good tool for doing that.
Yeah, like I said, it's pretty useful as a trap, like Mar said. Main reason being, it doesn't look like it would be, just looking at the frame data with the 50 frame startup. The main reason it is because of how unintuitive the proper reaction to it is. So it takes a little bit of extra time to react and switch into the mode of reacting to it properly, unless it's just happening all the time and you get very used to the situation in the match. So it's a little bit better as a trap than, like I said, the 50 frame startup makes it seem, but be careful with how you use it.
Yeah, be careful. I would just use it in me personally, I use it in the same vein as EX command grab. That's just how I think about the tool. I kind of hardly go for the Tech 4 trap, not because I don't know it exists, it's because I keep mistiming it and I'm like, nah, screw this. So I don't really go for it, but if you have the timing down, it's definitely a good tool to have, especially if you put somebody in the corner, they're going to probably more than likely roll forward most of the time. So like if you're in this position where you chain them, but you're not directly in the corner, very, very strong. Because they're going to be there.
One use that it can kind of have is Anakaris actually has a pretty dangerous mix-up once he gets a knockdown close to the corner. It's something I probably should have mentioned with when we were talking about the pyramid dive. But if he has them near the corner, he knocks them into the corner with a sweep. If he's standing at about sweep range outside of the corner, he can do a jump and a downward pyramid dive. And if they roll out of the corner, they're going to have to deal with a four-way mix-up immediately. Which side you're going to hit them either in the air as an overhead or on the ground with a crouching light afterwards if they roll forward from the corner. So if you're doing that pretty consistently, this is a very strong tool that Anakaris has in the corner. His mix-up gets a lot better in the corner, is doing the downwards pyramid dives on people rolling out. If people start to wake up consistently in the corner from those situations and are scared of rolling out, then you can, after the sweep, you can just do a portal. And if they wake up in the corner, they're pretty much going to be stuck with that. And one is generally enough to scare people into just rolling out again. You don't have to do that move very consistently. Because of how flashy the move is, it gets into people's heads even if they're not super aware of what's happening consciously. They'll start rolling out again. But you shouldn't be going for it all the time.
Yeah. And I think that's pretty much the utility for this move.
Yeah, I think that's about all I have to say about the,
now I gotta
portal.
Attempt to do Pharaoh's Magic, which is annoying on pad.
Yeah. So there are 3 versions of Pharaoh's Magic. Each version costs a different amount of meters. So Pharaoh Magic, the version that costs 1 meter, does the least damage. And they'll have different inputs, so I guess they do count as different moves. The level 1 version of Pharaoh's Magic, the input is medium kick jab down, then or medium kick light punch down, then light kick medium punch. Oh wait, yeah. For the level 1 version. I never used the level 1 version, but so this move is generally terrible. You don't really want to use this move very much. It's very flashy. It's very cool. One thing that it does have is that because it has the Raging Demon style input, you can cancel any grounded normal into it. Like you could do dashing normals canceled into it. So sometimes you can do like kind of a frame trap with moves that people wouldn't expect you to be able to cancel. So if you do, for example, dash fierce cancels into Pharaoh Magic, sometimes that's a little bit of a frame trap because they see you do dash fierce. Normally the reaction is they can do something after that. And Anakaris can't do anything. He was dashing. He can't cancel it. And then you have this hitbox coming out immediately. But it starts up kind of slow. Like it's pretty slow actually. The first active frame is on frame 38. The projectile travels okay. Anakaris is kind of in the air there. Like people will. One thing that happens sometimes that I've seen more often than probably it should happen is that if you do grounded Pharaoh's Magic, and for example Felicia does Dancing Flash, and the invincibility of Dancing Flash avoids the projectile, she won't actually hit Anakaris. She'll just be rolling into his feet because he is in the air, but he still has a push box that extends to the ground. Like his push box is on the ground, but his hurt box is up in the air. So he's kind of floating there for a little bit while he's doing that. The projectile travels very slow. Of course, if it hits them, then it goes into like a auto animation where he hits them with different things. Each version does additional damage. They do more hits. So the level 2 version, which is the one that I use most of the time, is Roundhouse, strong, then down 2 into medium kick, fierce punch. It's the level 2 version. Then the level 3 version, kind of famous because it uses all 6 buttons. It's Roundhouse, strong, short, down, jab, forward, fierce. So there's a little pattern there with how the buttons work. And that's the level 3 version. Mechanically, they pretty much all work the same, but they do different damage. One thing that's a little bit interesting about the projectile is that it'll go through certain things. Like one of the only utility uses that I've noticed for this move Well, first of all, you can do it in the air and on the ground, different than in other games like Vampire Hunter. But the projectile will go through certain things. For example, QB's EX Honey Bubble. If QB throws the Honey Bubble and you do this from full screen, usually in the air, the projectile will actually travel right through the bubble. It won't collide with it. So if she throws that and tries to advance behind the bubble, as she usually does, dashing at you, and you do that move, and if she's just kind of coming in recklessly, she can get snagged by it. It's very risky. It's mostly just a flashy thing to do. One thing you'll notice there that Mar did is that the level 3 version of this move, Pharaoh Decoration, does actually put them into the same transformation that Dimitri does for his Midnight Bliss. So he's not the only character that does that. He gets that too. A lot of people don't know that. It's not really relevant to anything. But it's very difficult to find a use for this move. Mostly, I just use it if you're trying to be very flashy, it can be used as kind of a weird frame trap from a move that's normally not cancelable. Someone's not expecting you to be able to do a move after, but it's not a strong move in any sense, but it can be a surprising move sometimes, is how I would characterize it.
Yeah. I mostly never opt to go for this move at all, just because of how long the startup is and how he's just stuck in the air for like a half an hour, but there is one other thing with this tool. I don't know if this works on Valletta, but he has a situational unblockable with...
yeah, similar to Bishamon's ES Fireball.
So, like, he does have an unblockable with Pharaoh's Magic. It revolves around doing standing heavy punch and having it blocked and then canceling it. And this hitting at a specific distance, but not... This probably runs off the same rules of Bishamon's unblockable, so it'll either work on some characters or it won't. And I'm not sure who it does. Also, you can punch him out of it before it happens, so it's not like yeah, he doesn't have a setup for it, whereas a meaty like Bishamon does.
Yeah,
they just have to be the only way to set that up is to just pressure them enough to where they give you mental frame advantage, where they're like, oh, I'm so scared, unblockable, and then hopefully they didn't jump or hit any buttons, and then it'll work. But otherwise, you'll probably never get to use that as a tactic. But yeah, I opt to mostly never use it. I don't even have that, I know how to do the move and stuff like that, but I never really use it. I try to avoid it at all costs.
Yeah, like Marsh said, you're really sitting out there forever. It has 123 frames of recovery. So that's a long time.
Oh yeah. And I think that's pretty much it with that move. I guess we're on to the final move, the Dark Force.
Dark Force, yeah. So Anakaris' Dark Force is one of the worst ones in the game. It's also really strange the way it works. So he activates his Dark Force and he has hyper armor the whole time, and he's floating up in the air like that, as you can see. As you're floating up there, you can do punching moves as normal. You can do your regular punches. The entire time you're doing your punches, you can see your legs, Kaibit there, is walking around on his own. He will constantly advance forward, or you can see if he crosses over, he'll switch sides, but he'll keep moving in the same direction. As he's walking out there, you can press kick buttons, and he'll perform different ones. So if you press short, he does the same short that you would have normally, or if you do stand forward, he'll do the same stand forward that you would have normally. His stand roundhouse, though, is different, obviously, since Anakaris' stand roundhouse is so weird. He does a really big roundhouse kick that is very slow, and it halts him out there forever. If you get stuck in this somehow, you probably just want to be doing, you can hit whatever on Kaibit down there, because there's no hitbox, it doesn't really matter. But you'll probably want to deactivate as soon as possible. You can use Jump Strong to kind of get away, to stop them from just jumping at you. One of the reasons why this move is so bad, actually, is because you take an incredible amount of extra damage when you have it on. And because you have armor, generally the optimal thing for your opponents to do in the situation that you've activated is to just jump and do jump chains. And they'll do a ridiculous amount of damage to you, and it will hurt so much. You really don't want to use this move. There is one situation in which it's kind of useful. if you're playing against Albath, the fish character, and he activates his Dark Force, if you immediately activate your Dark Force, you'll be floating at a height that it's impossible for him to hit you while he's doing his Dark Force. There's nothing that he can do to hit you while he has his Dark Force on. That's kind of something that it has going for it. You can also kind of just float. The float doesn't last as long, obviously, but that's... I really have to scrape the bottom of the barrel to come up with anything that could be potentially useful about this move.
Yeah, it's definitely not a particularly useful move because there's nothing. It doesn't do anything. There's like zero mix-up out of it. You're just kind of just floating, hoping that you're just trying to poke them. I guess like at best, you could kind of just get a normal out and poke them around, and kind of push them in a way because like. You know, you can cover these two options, right? And you can kind of just, like, as long as the legs don't move far enough, you're trying to, like, push them away at best, but it's not great. It doesn't really do anything. It does have a cool win pose, though, if you do kill with this thing.
There is, so if, for example, your opponent is on 1 pixel of life, you just need 1 hit to win, you're still on your first bat with an extremely healthy amount of life, there's no risk of you dying, really. You could activate this and use the armor just to kind of bully yourself in. The opponent probably being worried about that 1 pixel is going to clam up a little bit. That's something maybe, but that's a situation that's already won there that I'm trying to think of a use for this.
Yeah, that's a strategy. I guess it's cool because it laughs at you or something. That's about it. It's a pretty bad move.
Yeah. So that's a little bit. Most characters in the game don't really have a great Dark Force. Only a few really do, and most of them use it for other things.
Yeah.
Like just the activation or something, but yeah, it's not very good.
Yeah.
So I guess one thing that it has is similarly to how other Dark Force moves are used with against Fish's bubble. It's something. Like if he knocks you down in the corner, you can use it to avoid the bubble, but you're in a much worse situation than other characters who have Dark Force activations or that will avoid getting hit by the bubble. Because it's a Dark Force, you can't do it as a reversal. So even though it's invincible from the start, you can't do it as a reversal. You need a frame there where you do the input. He generally has better options for those situations if you need the frame.
There was one extra move we forgot.
What's that?
The backdash.
The backdash? Yeah, so I wanted to talk about movement next, actually, because we haven't talked about... we talked about the ground dash a little bit, not exactly, specifically, but the backdash, this is... I don't want to say a great move. It's a good move. It's something he needs. It's something he utilizes a lot, and it's pretty cool. But so the backdash, when Anakaris is against the corner there, if you try to backdash, he'll teleport to the other side of the screen. This starts up immediately after the input. The problem is that the input is 2 frames because you have to do 2 dash inputs. So you do need a 2-frame gap to do this, even though it starts up in 0 frames after you do it. He's immediately invincible. So when characters are doing pressure strings and stuff, you do need a clean 2-frame gap, and then you need a clean backdash, 2-frame backdash input in order to utilize it most effectively. But this is one of his best tools at escaping corner pressure. The fact that he can backdash to the other side of the screen, sometimes if you do it enough, there could be a little bit of a mix-up where the opponent will try to bait you into doing that because he is very punishable on the other side. Once he comes out, there's a couple of frames where they can do dash sweep or they can do a super or something. Fish actually has the thing with the waves that if he sees you doing that, he can do the wave super, and that'll, because it hits the full screen just on the ground, it'll hit you there. But this is a very strong option that Anakaris has, and like I said, he needs to use any defensive measure that he has access to. And if there's an opportunity for you to get out of the corner safely with this move, you should do it, because the corner is not a place that you want to be. Like I said, that you have to input a backdash. You have 2 frames to input the backdash, and because you have to hit 4-4 twice, if someone's anticipating you doing this, though, they can keep catching you with lows. If you're just mashing this in a block string, they can start doing crouch short, and if you're still mashing, like, they can just keep hitting you with crouch short or something. So you have to be a little bit careful about when you try to go for it. You do need a little bit of a gap there to input it, even though it starts up in 0. It's as soon as you input the move, it starts up 0 frames. But yeah, very strong option.
Overall, I usually generally use this tool whenever I feel like you're just kind of like playing a game of chickens. Like, you're right here, you know, you're defending your space, and they want to get in to but you just gotta, like you're saying, you're just like, you're waiting for them to jump most of the time. That's the best way to be getting it. Again, matchup dependent, because this character in particular can punish him for doing it at any time. But like in other matchups where the characters are not like, don't have a full screen projectile move that they could use to punish you with,
or something like Gallon, who can beast cannon,
or can beast cannon you. You're just mostly like trying to like get them in a situation where you're looking for them to pressure you, and that's your opportunity to use it.
One thing you have to be careful with using this is that it will only activate if you're actually all the way in the corner when you try to do it. It's happened to me more often than I would care to admit that I'm a pixel away or so from actually being in the corner, and I try to backdash out of something that would be a beautiful escape from whatever my opponent was doing, and instead I just backdash into the corner, I don't move, and I get punished for doing the dash. And so you have to be very sure that you are actually locked all the way in the corner when you attempt to do this move. Speaking of dashes, actually, one thing I guess that we haven't covered is that when you dash in this game for Anakaris, or characters in general, if you wait too long to do a move, then there's a short recovery animation that his dash has that he kind of has to go through. However, if you cancel his dash into a move such as jab or something immediately, then you don't have that recovery animation. You just do the jab and then you recover and you're fine. So when you're dashing around, it's a little bit better to dash with a normal, and it's a little bit safer because you don't have that period where you're locked into like not being able to control your character as much. That's just a little something about the dash, on top of being able to dash and do standing and crouching moves like we talked about earlier.
I think that's pretty much it with the entirety of the character.
Yeah, I'm wondering, is there anything else that we didn't cover? Or I guess if anyone's watching, do you guys have any questions about something that we maybe didn't cover? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.